It's now just gone 2 o'clock, so welcome everybody to the Planning Committee today. First meeting now in October. Welcome to all members, the press I believe are at the back, applicants, everyone else that's all sat at the back. Please could you all make sure that you've switched off your mobile phones before we start the committee, as it does interfere with our operators there at the front. If you'd kindly do that. Members are still looking for their mobile phones. Right, thank you. First of all,
Councillors Webb and Doug Edwards.
Councillor Evans.
Councillor Jim Higginson and Roger Harris.
Thank you. Any more apologies? Right, thank you. Declarations of interest, please.
As and when, Chair.
Thank you. No one has got one up at front? Because it is better if you do it at the beginning of the meeting, if possible. Right. We'll now go on to confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 8th of September. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4 and page 5. Does anybody second Councillor Evans? Councillor Murphy seconds it. Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. Now we go back to the... And now we'll have a presentation, item 4 on the agenda, to receive and note the development plan. And I believe that... Are you presenting it, Mark? Or Martin or Jane?
Thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a double act.
Right, thank you.
Since
I said 3 names, it'll be good for a double. Thank you.
This item of the agenda, Chair, is to present to committee for information purposes the annual monitoring report on the local development plan. So once the LDP is adopted, the regulations require that we carry out monitoring the plan on an annual basis, as the name suggests. And this is the first report. So it covers the period from the 27th of February 2014 to the end of March 2015. And then from here on in, they'll be done just on a financial year basis. So the process is the AMR report goes to Cabinet member for approval, but we wanted to bring it to committee first for your information and any comments you may have, because obviously it's a critical document to your work. It then gets sent off to the Welsh Government by the end of this month, so by 31st of October, and every authority in Wales has to go through that process once their LDP is adopted. In terms of what the AMR actually says, it goes through at traffic lights, various monitoring indicators against performance for the year, and I'll pass over to Jane in a second to go through a bit more of the detail on there. But the long and short of it is, it's the first report we've done, the first AMR. So obviously it's impossible at this stage to identify any trends, but there's nothing in there that causes us immediate concern. Jane will pick out probably some of the detail on housing delivery, but combined with that performance, the fact it's the first monitor, and what we know is in the pipeline, and even on today's agenda, we're not at this stage concerned with the LDP's performance and how it's delivering. So like I said, this is the first one. It's for committee's comments, ultimately to go to Cabinet member for approval. So if you have got any comments, by all means let us have them, we can pass them on. But probably when we'll really get stuck into a bit more detail is this time next year, once we've got 2 reports to look at. Can I pass over to Jane for any detailed comments?
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, this is our first AMR that I'm very pleased to present to this committee, and it monitors the first operational year in the life of our LDP. As such, it does provide very much an initial position statement, and it provides the baseline data for comparative analysis in future AMRs. Section 5 of the monitoring report itself provides a very detailed assessment of plan performance, and we can see from this that a majority of our indicator targets and monitoring outcomes are being achieved. And in the Planning Committee report before you this afternoon, there's a list there of perhaps what we consider to be some of the most significant findings. And those would include, for example, the progress that's being made towards the implementation of the spatial strategy, the demonstration of our 5-year housing land supply, the approval for 519 residential dwelling units, our very low vacancy rates in our county main towns and local centres in the central shopping areas, and the substantial proportion of development that has been permitted on brownfield land. The report also outlines a number of indicator targets and monitoring outcomes that are not currently, and I use the word currently there, being achieved. We can see that these are still in the minority, and again the report before Planning Committee today lists perhaps a couple of the most significant, those being the limited progress in terms of the number of residential completions, and also perhaps the limited take-up of employment land on our strategic employment sites. I must emphasise, though, following on from Mark's points there, we do not consider that any of these represent sort of fundamental issues with the plan strategy or the plan policies at this time. Indeed, to a certain extent, these outcomes may be anticipated, as this is the first year that the plan has been operative. We've seen that residential completions have been low, and many of these are residual from the unitary development plan. And it is expected that the completion rate will increase over the remainder of the plan period as our allocated strategic sites come forward in accord with the spatial strategy, obtain their consents and are developed. The AMR also updates on progress with our supplementary planning guidance, and during this monitoring period you can see that we have prepared and consulted on 6 SPG documents. And further detail will of course be included in next year's AMR, and I can promise you more to come. So in conclusion, I think it's fair to say that good progress is being made in terms of delivering our identified targets and monitoring outcomes. I reiterate, this is the first AMR. The plan's only been operative for 1 year, so its impacts can only be limited at this time. And any conclusions now are preliminary. There's no evidence at this stage to suggest that we need to review the plan at this early stage in its implementation. We are actively seeking to progress the delivery of our allocated sites, and from future AMRs we will be able to see trends being identified and for firmer conclusions to be drawn. The recommendation before you today is to note the AMR's contents and its key findings. And again, Mark has outlined the next steps in terms of endorsement by individual member decision and submission to the Welsh Government by the statutory deadline of the 31st of October. We will continue now to closely monitor the plan using the mechanisms that we have set up this year. And indeed, I very much look forward to reporting to Planning Committee this time next year on our second AMR. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I don't know if Martin wishes to comment at all, or do we want to take some questions?
No, it's fine. I'm just
Right.
questions.
Right, thank you, Martin. Anybody wish to pass any questions? Councillor Murphy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree entirely. It's too early yet to say anything much about this at all. We are recommended to receive and note it, and I think that's probably appropriate. We've got sites coming forward all the time. Nobody was going to be lining up to come the following day after the LDP. I think it points to quite a lot of progress in the first year of the plan. So I'm happy to propose that we receive and note it.
Thank you very much. Before we do that, Councillor Taylor wishes to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. I note that on page 88, where it notes progress against projects in the local transport plan, it does fail to mention the progress made in Mega Station, which is actually priority number 4 on the local transport plan, and I'd like to see the progress around that included, because it is one of the authority's strategic priorities. And the other matter I just wanted to raise for noting is, whilst this is a monitoring report, and I fully understand that, in the original local development plan, it makes it quite clear that before the developments at the strategic sites at Rockfield Farm and Vinegar Hill are brought forward, there must be progress on the community facilities deficit in Mega. I note that there isn't any comment about that and the current lack of progress at this stage. I do think that that should be in there and reflected, because it is really important in terms of the wider issues in bringing that site forward and in making that, you know, an appropriate part of the local development plan.
Thank you very much. I think that as it is early days, I think the best thing, as Councillor Murphy suggests, that we note it. If the Councillor Wintle at the back, you wish to comment?
Yes, Madam Chairman. I agree it's only just a year, but already we've got this, what do you call it? Oh, I'll read it, okay. The low cost element has gone from 35% down to 30%. Is this policy, or is this just a one-off for this one big site? Or because I'd like to know for definite, because it leaves us open to precedent.
Thank you, Councillor Wintle. Mark will answer Councillor, or comment on Councillor Taylor's observations, and then hopefully he can address yours as well, Councillor Wintle.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I just wanted to query quickly with Mega Station. Perfectly happy to add comment on that. But I just wanted to clarify this monitoring reports for the last financial year. So I'm fully aware of progress made this financial year. Was physically here last financial year, so I'm not sure what was their progress during that period to report. Okay, we can add that in then. In terms of the percentage, in terms of the AMR, that identifies how affordable housing's been achieved or not. But I think, is your question talking about one specific site?
At the moment, I hope. But I can't understand why we've reduced it to 30% when this is over 300 houses. They've got the economy of scale, so why have we reduced it to 30%? You know, there are over 3,000 people out there requiring accommodation, and this is the only way we're going to get that accommodation. So to cut it down, like we have, I think it's irresponsible.
Chair, should we answer that detailed point when we look at the application in question later on the agenda? Yes. In general terms, though, no, the policy is as per the LDP. The policy does allow for viability to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. So 35% is the target for most sites. There's some sites with lower targets anyway in the plan. That's all set out. But that is the starting point. If there are site-specific viability issues, the policy does allow us to have those negotiations, and then those decisions are almost always on the big sites, almost always come to committee anyway.
Thank you, Mark. Right, thank you. As Councillor Murphy has now asked it to be noted and recommended for us to do so, could I have a show of hands? Do you have a seconder first? Please, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Evans, the seconded. Show of hands to note the report. Yes, he will take your comments, Councillor Taylor. Right, thank you very much. Right, we'll go on now with the rest of the agenda of today. And as we now start what we'd call the applications properly, I will introduce myself as Councillor Ruth Edwards, Chair of the Planning Committee, and then the rest of the officers here will introduce themselves.
Yes, I'm Robert Tranter, the Head of Legal Services and the Temporary Monitoring Officer.
Peter Clark, Vice Chairman of Planning.
Got me out there. Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager, actually, not Development Control Managers. We need to change that. Thank you.
Mark Hand, Head of Planning.
Paula Clark, I'm Planning Applications and Enforcement Manager. Sarah King, Democratic Services.
Shirley Wigham, Housing Strategy.
Right, thank you all very much for that. And so with people who are, and we are live streaming today, so there'll be people from all areas will be watching us anyway, so it does help them identify who's speaking. We'll now go to page 117. If you have the agenda, you will see that we will not take it in sequence because we try to accommodate the people who come in and wish to speak before we take the others on the agenda. Right, so first of all, we go to page 117.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil.
This is a full application for 8 new residential units on land to the rear, that is the west of Gunter Mansions, which are those stone buildings that you see in the backdrop there, which are 34 to 39 Cross Street, Abergavenny. The proposed units will comprise 1 one-bedroom flat, 1 two-bedroom flat, and 6 2/3-bedroom houses. Third bedroom is very small, could be a study. The buildings are proposed to be a mix of 2 and 2.5 stories with varying ridge and eave levels, which we'll have a look at in a moment in the illustrative material. And the site is currently a private car park, as you can see in the photograph there. It's proposed that the dwellings will utilise the existing access off Bailey Priory, which is itself accessed off Monk Street, with a pedestrian link only to the adjacent public car park, which is behind where this photograph was taken, which is near the bus station. The site is within the conservation area. It is also adjacent to the Grade 2 listed Gunter Mansions. The site is also within a C2 floodplain. The application site is within the development boundary of Abergavenny, where new residential development is acceptable in principle under LDP Strategic Policy S1, subject to detailed planning considerations, which we're now looking at. The proposed scheme has been designed as a traditional form of development, made up of a terrace of 6. Let's have a look at that. Sorry, there's the site there, as you can see in red. So there's the car park near the bus station, just below it. You've got the Swan Hotel just to the south, and the properties that form Gunter Mansions to the west of the site on Cross Street. And then the large car park that runs up to the Priory behind the site. And Bailey Priory is in between that, which is the access, but it's from the north, from Monk Street, where you access the site. So that's the layout. So it takes the form of a terrace there of 6 2.5-storey, 3-bedroom dwellings. The terrace will be linked by a first floor, 1-bedroom flat, with access underneath into the parking area and turning area. And behind that, which is marked B on the plan there, that will be a 2-bedroom, two flats above that unit, which will have garaging below, which we'll see in the elevation details in a moment. So that's the terrace to Bailey Priory up above, looking back with the the access way underneath the flat above, or the unit above, leading into the rear here. That would be the rear of the units. You can see the PVs on the back, on the roof plane, with roof lights up above on the front. And then that shows a section through the site. So you can see the site's actually raised slightly because of the flooding levels, to make sure that it's out of the 1 in 1,000-year flood. And then that's the little block at the back, which will have garaging underneath and 2 flats above. Okay, sorry, 1 flat above. The other flat is above the access, sorry, as you come in, sorry. And those are the floor plans. So if I go back to the terrace, that's sort of this one we need to look at. So there's a mix of architectural styles within the vicinity of the site, including the Victorian Swan Hotel and the much older Gunter Mansions, together with more modern flats further northwest on the opposite side of Bailey Priory. The draft conservation area appraisal for the area describes the immediate area encompassing Bailey Priory as the historic core of the town, characterised by varied storey heights and stepped roof lines reflecting the gradient of the roads. It's considered that the proposed new development should not compete visually with the buildings on Cross Street, and therefore effort has been made to keep the ridge heights of the proposed new dwellings to a reasonable height, while also ensuring the scheme is financially viable in terms of the number and size of the units. As a result, the character of the proposed development is more akin to the smaller properties along Bailey Priory rather than the buildings on Cross Street. External materials are proposed to be traditional, with rendered walls, brick detailing and natural slate roofs. The scale, design and layout of the proposed development are all considered to be appropriate in this setting, but the detailing of the buildings will be critical to the overall success of the scheme. And as such, it's suggested that the window details and materials are conditioned, as well as the other items listed as late correspondence by the council's heritage manager. The application site is immediately adjacent to the Grade 2 star listed Gunter Mansions, with the rear elevation of this building forming the boundary with the site. Gunter Mansions form part of the street frontage of Cross Street, but the building, Grade 2 star as I've said, is primarily listed for its interior, which contains rare and historically important 17th century decorative plaster ceilings. However, externally, the original part of the building is also distinctive, with the elevation facing the application site being stone with two projecting gables. As existing, the car parking area to the rear for the shops and flats on Cross Street, just go back to the photograph here, but an unfortunate modern single-storey flat-roofed extension running along the rear of the building. On the proposed plans, the area to the immediate rear is to be retained for parking for the Cross Street properties, with the only change being the surfacing together with some landscaping. While a larger landscape buffer between the listed buildings and the application site would be beneficial, given that this area is being retained for parking, it would be, in our view, unreasonable to insist upon this area becoming a larger landscape buffer. In the longer term, it is hoped that the modern extension will be removed from the listed building, which would result in the creation of additional space around that building, separate from the application site. And the proposal, while adding a modern development in relatively close proximity to the rear of Gunter Mansions, would leave a reasonable space to leave the ability to read the rear of the historic building, particularly to its northern end, and would enhance the area by it would enhance the area visually by replacing the unkempt parking area, and would sit as an attractive feature in its own right, especially provided high-quality traditional materials and detailing, such as reveals and robust subsills are employed. And as such, the proposal is not considered to harm the setting of the listed building, and indeed is considered to enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. In terms of access, the main part of the site is not a service area or formal parking area for the shops fronting onto Cross Street. It is private vacant land over which tenants of the buildings on Cross Street have a right to pass to reach an ad hoc parking spaces immediately behind the shops. The rest of the site is currently uncontrolled and used, albeit unlawfully, by others to park. The properties on Cross Street are serviced from the front. Formalised parking is proposed in this application for use by tenants of the shops of Cross Street, which would be an improvement. As the site is uncontrolled and used informally at present, there is currently a relatively high turnover of vehicles accessing the site. And this has been shown in the transport statement accompanying the application. Use of the site for 8 units with 14 car parking spaces is unlikely to lead to a significant change in vehicle numbers using Bailey Priory. And given the current ad hoc use of the site, it is not therefore considered that it would be reasonable to insist upon the submission of a safety audit to prove that safety is sustainable in this location. And while the number of parking spaces technically falls below the required amount in the adopted parking guidelines, given the proximity of the site to a large public car park and its sustainable town centre location, it is considered that the parking provision in this case is adequate. There would also be, as said, several visitor spaces for use by tenants of Cross Street that may not always be fully utilised or would be likely to be vacant outside normal business hours. The construction of the development, including the delivery of building materials, can be controlled by a construction method statement or management plan that can be a condition of any consent. The applicant maintains that vehicles of varying sizes can turn within the site, and they do not have to use the highway to turn, as there will be no gate preventing public access in and out of the development. In terms of flooding, the site is within flood zone C2, and therefore new residential development, which is vulnerable development, would be in conflict with policy SD3 of the LDP. However, it is necessary to have a contextual analysis of the site, and an idea of the scope and height of floodwaters. In this case, NRW have undertaken recent studies that reveal that at worst case scenario, flooding would be at a depth of 380 millimetres at the 1 in 1,000 year flood event. The lowest floor level proposed is 150 millimetres above this level. As such, the proposed residential dwellings will be flood-free in a flood event. The remainder of the development, that is the shared access and car parking areas, are predicted to flood at levels of generally 300 millimetres or less, and critically at low velocities. TAN 15 requires all development to be flood-free during the 1 in 100 year flood event, and therefore this aspect of the proposed development is not, it is considered to be in line with TAN 15. It's not in line with TAN 15, However, in this instance, in view of the shallow depths of flooding predicted and the fact that the existing overland flow routes are to be maintained following the development, NRW has advised that it would not be likely to be able to substantiate an objection to the proposed development on flooding grounds. And the proposal can be justified in this location under TAN 15 because the risks, which are limited in this case, can be acceptably managed, and the scheme would bring forward much needed housing in a sustainable location in the town centre. During the application process, the Council's archaeological advisors, the Morgant Archaeological Trust, recommended that the application be deferred pending an archaeological site investigation. This was undertaken earlier this year and uncovered a well-preserved Roman road and also some medieval and post-medieval artefacts. Although this is an important find, following the investigative work already undertaken, the Trust have no objection to the positive determination of the application, but recommend that a condition is attached to any planning consent that is granted, ensuring that any archaeological features that are disturbed by the work are identified, fully investigated and recorded, and this will then provide the detail needed to mitigate the impact of the proposal, which may entail the full excavation and recording of some features, as well as ensuring that groundworks are undertaken under archaeological supervision in other areas. It's understood, just out of a point of interest, that the Roman road is actually away from where the buildings are going and is more towards the rear of Gunter Mansion, so within the parking area. In terms of site viability and provision of affordable housing, it is acknowledged that abnormal foundations are required at this site. And as the site is brownfield land and used as a car park, remediation and remodelling will also be required to facilitate the development, along with some infrastructure improvements. On this basis, when the figures are run through the development appraisal toolkit, which the council use, the residual value of the site shows that the scheme is not viable with 3 affordable houses. And when the exercise was repeated with 2 affordable units, the results showed that the scheme remained very borderline and other Section 106 obligations would have to be lost. And therefore, after much discussion between the applicant and the council's housing officer, it was agreed to accept 1 2-bedroom house for low-cost home ownership. The other Section 106 contributions agreed are 31,000 towards public open space provision and almost 6,000 for children's play. So subject to the Section 106 agreement, we would recommend approval.
Thank you very much, Phil. That was a great detailed report. On my list, I did have a member of Abergavenny Town Council wish to speak, but apparently he has not arrived. Did you have a statement for John Prosser to read, Phil?
No. Did he email it to you?
Well, I haven't got it today.
Anything.
Is there a member of Abergavenny Town Council here that wishes to speak on behalf of the Town Council, as Mr Woodhouse has not appeared? Yes.
When the members speak about
Yes, I'll take them first then. Right, so I'll then, please. Yeah. Could you state your name when you have 4 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In a way, my appearance here is somewhat superfluous. I'd only asked for the right of reply because I was told that there was an objection, and I felt it might be prudent to be here just in case any issue that he or she raised, would either need to be clarified or rebuffed. But as I am here, Chair, there are just a couple of things I would like to add. if I may. I'm a director of the applicant company who own this site. The applicant company is a property company in Monmouth. I would only add, I mean, we go along obviously with everything the case officer has said. I would only add that in our view, we think it's a sustainable development in that the land is brownfield, the location is close to the town centre, it's convenient for those who live there to walk to work, to walk to the shops, and the public transport hub is just behind the site. And more than that, housing in the town centre contributes to the 18-hour day, not just the 12-hour working day. The only other things I'd like to say, Chair, is just correcting a couple of facts. And just to say that in respect of the archaeological dig, the artefacts so far unearthed have all been donated to the museum by the applicant. There are a couple of points which the Abergavenny District Society have made in their letter, and could I refer you please to paragraph 4.3 of the case officer's report. It says firstly that the site in question was part of the curtilage of the listed buildings. Well, we have the listed building consent, we have the listing notices here, and we can assure you, and I'm sure the case officer was satisfied, that the car park is not part of the listing. In fact, if it was, we would have been asked to put in a listed building application. The Abergavenny District Civic Society put in 5 points which they wanted to raise. The first two on page 121, the 2 dot points have been dealt with by the case officer. The third one is interesting, the need to safeguard access from Bailey Priory to carry out necessary works on the listed building. Well, the Welsh Georgian Trust have an option to buy this building. They're going for funding at the moment, and it was not a requirement of them that we provided any form of access or safeguarded any form of access other than the normal space around the building to get ladders and scaffolding up, but nothing more than that. And the final point, uncertainties regarding the location of Seaby Brook. I have sent a plan to the case officer. The Environment Agency, or Natural Resource Wales as they're now called, sent us a plan confirming that the Seaby Brook does not run under the site, and I think that's accepted. So, Chair, I cannot really add anything further to the case officer's report. It only remains for me to say that otherwise we endorse the recommendation in it, and I hope that your members, after discussion, will agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Kelly. We have now got a member of the Abergavenny, members on the planning committee. The local member himself was unable to come forward today. He had a very important meeting, and he had asked for my discretion to have somebody to read out his letter. So we've done it really in a reverse. But Councillor Maureen Powell has now got that letter on her iPad, so she will, if she can. I think you could stay there, actually, Councillor Powell, if you wouldn't mind, and address the committee.
Thank you. Sorry about that, but I thought I might have got it. This is sent from 6 residents. Anthea Ferry, Park Crescent, Phil Boyer, King Street, Adrian Nelms, Blorange Road, Anna Petts, Park Avenue, Jay Shipley, Park Crescent, and Kiera Bomford, Clifton Road. I'll read it out to you. It was sent to John Prosser. Unfortunately, he can't be here. It says, we recognise the need for housing within the town centre. However, we do not believe that members of the Planning Committee have sufficient information to determine this application at the current time. We would urge them to defer this decision pending the receipt of additional and sufficient information regarding the immense impact on the local and indeed national heritage aspects surrounding this application. As noted by the Civic Society, until fairly recently, and since the initial planning application was submitted in 2010, the land subject to the application and the properties on Cross Street forming the historic Gunter Mansion were in common ownership prior to the company taking the decision to split into two titles. The owners have recently reached agreement with the Welsh Georgian Trust to sell them the Gunter Mansion, a Grade 2 listed building with its secret Roman Catholic chapel, the only one of its kind in Wales. The Trust will embark upon a comprehensive restoration programme with funding sought from the Heritage Lottery Fund, Enterprise Scheme and others. The Trust has made it clear that they see this as an integral part of the development of Abergavenny, in particular with regard to the heritage and tourist opportunities, as well as the regeneration of the town. This application for land that was formerly the garden of Gunter Mansion would essentially permit the construction of 8 dwellings in a very close proximity to this individual and historically important building. We consider that this would substantially detract from well-advanced proposals to develop a national and international tourist attraction. In addition, the recent discovery of the Roman road on the site, a find was quoted as saying, the first evidence of any Roman road within the town itself and is therefore of high significance, by Gwent and Glamorgan Archaeology Trust, has made consideration of the heritage impact of this planning application even greater. In Welsh Government Circular 61/96 on planning and the historical environment authorities, quote, should ensure that they have appropriately qualified specialist advice on any development which, by its character or location, might be held to have an effect on any sites or structures of the historical environment. They are specifically required in the exercise of their powers in a conservation area to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of that area. In response to the evaluation of the application at section 5.3 of the report to the committee, impact on listed buildings and conservation area, we consider that much more detailed consideration is required of the impact of this application on the area around the Gunter Mansion, which would be consistent with policy HE1 of the local development plan. And we would urge members to recommend that a detailed specialist assessment be undertaken of the impact on the important heritage aspects in this conservation area prior to determining this application, and therefore to defer full consideration pending that assessment. And it's signed by those 6 people.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Powell. Do you wish to comment on that statement at all?
Yes, I mean, an assessment has been made of the effect on the setting of the listed building and the impact on the conservation area in paragraphs 5.2 and 5.3. We've also consulted our own expert qualified conservation officers, heritage officers. We've got no objections subject to getting the detailing right. So, and it must be remembered that this is actually not owned by the Welsh Georgian Trust. If the site was going to be assembled comprehensively, that would have presumably been done already, and the current owners would have sold the land as one package. So really, whilst that might be an aspiration, it may not be particularly realistic. So this scheme is here before us. We feel it will have a beneficial effect on the conservation area, looking at its condition. I think several of the members who were there yesterday can make their own mind up on that. And fortunately, there does seem to be movement now on Gunter Mansions themselves being restored, which is to be commended and supported. I don't see that this scheme really would therefore then adversely impact on the ability of that to be read as its own quality heritage building. This can sit a reasonable distance back from that and provide valuable residential development within a highly sustainable location.
Thank you, Phil. As I say, a lot of members were there yesterday. So I will take any Abergavenny member first of all if they wish to comment. I don't know if Councillor Powell now wishes to comment, and then I'll take Councillor Phil Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman. I had read this previously, but didn't realise I'd have to read it out. All the years that I've been connected with Abergavenny, even when I lived outside Abergavenny, that space there behind was used just for parking for the various shops at the front. Or anybody else who could sneak down that lane and park without paying, so to speak. It's been in this sort, well, it was more untidy than this. It has been cleared. It was even more bushy and untidy. And it seems strange to me that the people that are looking and getting rather worried about it now, where I feel like saying, well, where have they been till now? Because this space has just been neglected. And it's pleasing to see that the Gunter Mansion is going to be restored in its own right. But as this is no longer part of the Gunter Mansion plot, I think that it'd be far better to build sympathetic properties on it and use it for dwellings, as there are many, many people in Abergavenny desperate to find somewhere to live. And as long as it's done tastefully, I don't think it's going to be adverse up against the Gunter Mansion. And I would recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Powell, and thank you indeed for reading out Councillor Pross's statement earlier on. Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think that any damage that was ever going to be done to Bailey Priory was done when those flats were built onto it on the side there. And I'm delighted to hear that there's a prospect of that single-storey carbuncle at the back of it being removed in any subsequent.
Might I add there, on looking at the screen, it looks as though that is the lower floor, but it's protruding from. It
does actually protrude by some.
It looks almost as if it's included into the.
But it isn't.
Yeah, it's not. It's quite deep. It's must be 4 or 5 meters. So yes, if that disappears, that would be really good. My understanding, reading all of the papers, is that most of the reason for the Grade 2 star listing on Bailey Priory was in fact to do with internal features, and we've heard from the applicants that the trust, the Georgian Trust, haven't made any request for anything other than access to the back. As regards the Roman Road, I don't see that there's any way of accommodating any public display of the Roman Road. And I think the Glamorgan and Gwent Archaeological Trust are right in saying that it should be noted, and it's pleasing that it is in fact in the car parking area, so if at any time it needed to be exposed, it could be. So on the basis of that, Chair, I can't see any reason to do anything other than approve the application.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Anybody else wish to comment? Otherwise, I can. Oh, Councillor Blakeborough. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the concerns of the Abergavenny District Society group. Where have they been? I guess it's just now they've started to get the money so they can sort of do some work on it. I suppose the fear is you don't know what's under there, although there has been some tests done and we found 1 or 2 artefacts, and we've established there is a Roman Road. There could be so much more under there. And I guess there's a fear that would we bury our heritage under this development if we don't excavate and find out what's there that might be very rare and worthy of tourists to come and view it. I have noted though there is a request to secure a programme of archaeological work in accordance with a written scheme of investigation. is that then to protect and preserve any archaeological findings? Because as they're digging the foundations, if they find something, is the aim to note it and cover it over anyway? Or is the aim, if it is really significant, then actually all development may stop?
Yeah, that's exactly what the written scheme of investigation is in that report. So it's as they're digging, anything they find, they have to report. It very much depends on what they find, is my understanding, as to what they do with it. So sometimes it will be record it, sort of photograph it, and bury it and carry on. Sometimes it will be taking it out, clean it up and displaying it in a museum. But it depends what they find. If we're talking some kind of urn or some extra bit of road or foundations of a building. But that's what the extra conditions for and what GGAT's asked for.
Who will monitor the build? Because they might find something and not say anything.
In archaeological terms, there's the scheme that needs approval via this condition would normally have an on-site archaeologist there during ground disturbing works. So once the foundations are done and they're above ground level, they're not needed anymore. But ground disturbing works, they'll have a qualified archaeologist on site.
That's what they call a watching brief, I believe, isn't it, Mark? And so everything is monitored and observed. Councillor Powell has moved for approval. Oh, sorry, Councillor Taylor, I didn't see your hand.
Got two questions, Chair, if I may, please. One relates to the comments from the highway officer on page 120. The highway officer seems to be particularly concerned about the access and is asking for a safety audit to be commissioned. And I just noted that it was quite interesting that the planning officer then sort of says, well, actually, I don't think the highway officer is right in many of their observations. And I thought that was quite, we know sometimes, Chair, we've had occasion where we haven't had full comments from highway officers. And we do, we normally get, some members of the planning committee tend to get quite excited over where there's not enough parking allocated. It does quite clearly say there isn't enough parking for the associated properties in here.
That usually arises when there is near at hand public car parking, so that does alleviate where we normally say 1 bedroom, 1 car parking space.
I was just interested. Well, it says quite clearly it doesn't meet the standards, but also there are some comments in there saying our highway officers are concerned about large vehicles turning, but then the planning officer counters with saying, well, the applicant says that there is room for large vehicles to turn. So I just kind of want some guidance about, where we should, on whose say-so we should, kind of put our faith, really. We are, sorry, so that's one question about the access and the parking. And the second one was just the rationale there around the affordable allocation, so from 3 to 1, but the 1 being a 2-bed. So I heard it and then I didn't quite understand the rationale. Would it be okay if we could have that repeated? And, given that we are constantly reminded about the need for affordable housing, and it's affordable on a 50-50 ownership basis, is that, can we just have some comment on that, please, just to...
Do you want to just comment on the highway issue first?
Please, thank you.
It's very much a contextual issue. Most of the time we agree with our highway colleagues. Sometimes I think we think that they're perhaps being overly technical in certain of their requirements. And what they perhaps sometimes don't look at is a fallback position. So current use is informally as a car park. There's lots of ad hoc parking going on there throughout the day, and possibly perhaps not so much in the evening because the public car parks are free then, but certainly throughout the daytime there's lots of trips going up and down the lane there. There's also other vehicles using the lane. So and there are flats along there which are clearly being serviced in terms of refuse collection already. So I think what we felt was that highways were perhaps a safety audit for a scheme of 8 dwellings was perhaps overstretching it somewhat, because that's quite a significant piece of work. And you'd normally do that as part of a Section 278 agreement as well. You wouldn't necessarily do it at the planning stage. So I think we felt in this instance that that was perhaps being a little bit overzealous. But ultimately, it's members' decision. If they think a safety audit is appropriate, then by all means. But bearing in mind the traffic flows along there, which exists now, and what would stem from what is a very small housing development, and we felt that that was not necessary in this instance.
Can I ask what would stop people from parking there anyway, though, even if they were converted into residential properties?
Well, it becomes more the surveillance from the actual residents themselves would really prevent people from parking there. I would have thought. I mean,
I'm just asking.
If you lived in one of those houses, you wouldn't
there?
allow somebody to go and park in your allocated space.
Well, I couldn't stop them though, could I? If it was a publicly
You could say that about
adopted
any
highway?
space.
Quite. But I'm just asking. At the moment it's used informally. What prevents people from using it as a?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be far more.
Oh, yeah.
What they call defensible space then
Just
under the
asking.
parking.
Yeah, to clarify, Chair, the parking isn't in publicly adopted highway, it's private land. So it's private part of this development site. So it would be equivalent of, a shopper parking on your driveway.
Okay. So there wouldn't be highway vehicles, our refuse vehicles wouldn't be going in there if it's private land.
No, I would imagine that they'd be serviced off the lane in front, so the people will wheel their bins out on bin day. You don't have bins. Wheel their bags out on bag day for collection from the highway.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole affordable housing.
Yeah, thank you, Shirley.
I undertook a viability study using the Development Appraisal Toolkit, and the 3 just wasn't viable, and neither was 2. I had my work checked by Dr. Andrew Golland, who's a consultant and who did come up with the data himself, and that's all that's viable is that one affordable unit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Powell and Councillor Dovey.
Reassure Francis. Bit further over the other side of the church, there's lower Monk Street, and in there are big sets of flats, and you could drive in there, and if you thought, well, we'll drive in there and park while we go shopping, but people don't go in there because they are aware of the fact that it's residential space, and this is going to be even harder to get into because you're going to have to go underneath that bit there. I mean, there's a notice up saying this is private land, and people don't go in there. So I can't see why they would be tempted to go through here. And that's just round the other side. And there's a couple of places where there's flats. And if you thought, there's a space in there, I'll go and park. But they don't. Up Hereford Road, there's 2 or 3 more lots of flats where there's open spaces. But you never see the general public parking in there because they know that they're... It's like somebody coming along and...
Thank you, Councillor Powell. I need to take Councillor Dovey, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't know whether this is a place I fear to go, but I'm going to have a go anyway. I'm more interested really in how this development is going to sit with the project that is going to be Gunter Mansions. Yesterday I looked at that building for some time and really tried to imagine it without that awful flat roof around it. And if you could sort of strip that away in your imagination, there is an absolutely spectacular building there. And if you look at the windows that exist, they have a strong character. And that building has the potential to have a really strong presence in Abergavenny and be a joy for people to go and see, even maybe park a little way from and imagine it there. So I would like to suggest it might be a good idea before we do any approval for this this development, we know what is being proposed by the trust for the building behind. Because I would hate to think that we put something or allowed something here that didn't reflect well on the other building. People commented on the street, what's the term nowadays, street furniture or whatever you want to call it, the surrounding buildings in that car park there. And it was thought that this development wouldn't be greatly out of phase with those. Well, frankly, that isn't any recommendation, because there isn't a building surrounding there that has really very much merit. So I see this as an opportunity. I see this. Is Councillor Traylor trying to sabotage me again, is it, Madam Chairman? I see this as an opportunity to do something special for Abergavenny, as well as provide something special in this development as well, that hopefully would complement what would be the plans for that building there. And I would urge not to rush at it, just give the developers for the new building, the existing building, what they intend to do there, and that, I think, will inform our decision on what we wish to put in the new development and its style.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. I will take Councillor Blakeborough then we will move to the vote. I dare say anything that would have arisen as concerns by the Conservation Officer would have been highlighted before now. Councillor Blakeborough, please.
Chairman, sorry, Councillor Blakeborough. Chairman, just on that point, members may want to have a look at the late correspondence on this item, and in there are the comments of Amy Longford, your Heritage Manager, and I think relevant to Councillor Dovey's points there is that Amy says, hope this is okay. I think that these details will make for a far more successful and considered scheme and will help to preserve the setting in the Grade 2-star listed building and not undermine the hard work being done behind the scenes with Gunter Mansions. So there has been considerable input from your conservation officers on this, I think.
Thank you, Rob. I had noted that Amy was at the back, and I'm sure she would have signified if there was any concern at all on the application. Councillor Blakeborough, do you quickly wish to say something, and then I will go to the vote. Thank you.
I'm fine now, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, I believe you moved for approval. You had a seconder with Councillor Murphy. Could I have a show of hands, please? Councillors?
9 for it, Chairman.
Those against?
Is granted 9 votes and 3 abstentions.
Thank you very much indeed. We now go to page 187, application 00210, and this is again is Abergavenny in Park Crescent. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application relates to the construction of a new dwelling at 61 Park Crescent, Abergavenny. It's one that members has visited yesterday. Phil put some photographs of the property. That's the existing property in the street scene. The new dwelling will be attached to the existing bungalow to create a pair of semi-detached bungalows. The existing dwelling stands in a large plot, and a pair of semi-detached bungalows would fit appropriately into the street scene. Concern has been raised regarding traffic movements as a result of the proposal. Whilst Park Crescent is a busy thoroughfare, the highway is relatively wide at this point. It's considered that the addition of a driveway and off-road parking is acceptable and will not have a detrimental effect on highway safety, as the additional traffic generated will be negligible. The existing dwelling does not sit centrally within the plot and therefore allows enough space within the plot for the new dwelling and has been designed to match the existing bungalow. There will be over 20 metres between the dormer windows in the roof of the new dwelling and the dwellings opposite in Park Crescent. And the only window to the side elevation, the next door's property, is a small bathroom window at ground floor level. The proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable in the street scene and not unacceptably harm the residential amenities of neighbouring properties. Officers therefore recommend approval of this application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you very much, Paula. I believe we have a Mr. Spencer who wishes to speak, please. Please state your name and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Stuart Spencer. Although I'm speaking on behalf of my wife and I am also representing the collective views of our neighbours in the direct vicinity. Apart from our concerns of having new houses built so close to our own house, our biggest concerns regard health and safety. By doubling the dwellings, it will at least double the vehicle activity onto and off the properties, along with the inevitable parking outside for visitors. Park Crescent continues to be a busy thoroughfare throughout the day, which helps motorists avoid the traffic lights on Hereford Road. This is especially true in the morning and evening rush hour, as well as the school run. It's used frequently by emergency vehicles and is even on the driving test run. It's a particularly dangerous area with the road opposite also seeing much traffic coming onto Park Crescent at this point. There's a bus stop opposite and is also the main stop for the school bus going to Monmouth School. Critically, at the side of the property is a lane which is in constant use, especially for many children going to and from King Henry School, as well as other children going past on the way to Cantref Primary and Our Lady and St Mary's schools. So therefore it's an absolute pinch point. The fact that the new dwellings will only take up half the available land areas leaves us in no doubt that the developers intend building further properties at the back, which will further increase the traffic, leading to a considerable risk of accidents and conflict, not to mention the loss of privacy to existing adjacent dwellings. We understand that the pre-application guidance from the council, which was available at the time of the sale of the property, indicated that they would accept demolition of the existing building and they would consider the building of 2 semi-detached houses, which would have allowed for a more balanced relationship within the plot. The current application has evidently been adapted to retain access to the land at the rear, which everyone in the neighbourhood believes is the main goal of the developers. So in conclusion, should the committee be minded to approve the current application, after taking all the objections into account, we would request that some conditions be applied to prevent further development of the rest of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Spencer. We now have Mr. P. Thomas who wishes to speak. Please state your name and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Paul Thomas. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You've had the opportunity of reading the design and access statement submitted by my architect, and you've had the benefit of visiting the site. My objective is to improve the site by renovating the neglected bungalow and by building a mirror image of the existing bungalow. The development is infill. Indeed, when the land was originally sold for building by Abergavenny Town Council in 1946, it was sold as 2 building plots, but only one of the properties was ever built. That is why the existing bungalow is not in the centre of the site. This is not an application. This is not an application where a new dwelling is being shoehorned into a garden, unlike some other properties in Park Crescent. It is notable that the objectors from both 30 and 63 both have dwellings built in the original garden land. Number 59 is currently overlooked by 2 windows, those 2 large windows with clear glazing. Under the proposed development, only 1 window with obscured glazing will overlook number 59. The application is recommended for approval by Planning Officer, Town Council, and Highways have no objection. I would therefore invite the committee to approve my application. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, oh, actually, there were several members of the committee went yesterday to have a really good look around the site. So I'm sure you all came to sort of some conclusions on what you felt about this application. Abergavenny members first, please, if you would like to comment. I'm sorry, Maureen, it's only you here today. The others are incapacitated.
I'm used to standing on my own. Yes, we went to look at it yesterday, and I know that the gentleman said he's concerned about further building in the back, but of course that would be another application altogether, and it doesn't really have any bearing on this application. We're just looking at this application, and I mean, I think that as it's going to be in one building, semi-detached as opposed to two detached bungalows. I think it was two detached places in that space. It would be very difficult. But as they're semi-detached, I think it should fit in reasonably well. And I don't think we should look ahead to the piece behind that is yet again. So I have no objection to it. So.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Anyone else wish to comment? Councillor Blakeborough?
Could you, sorry, Phil, could you just go through the neighbour's right to privacy? I mean, as far as I understand it, I think everything's covered in terms of planning considerations for that. Am I right in that?
For material consideration, I think the thing to remember in this instance is the neighbour, if I can just show you on that photograph. You look, the neighbour there, really the overlooking is coming from the neighbour to this plot, really, rather than vice versa. The actual mirror image of this, if you like, that will go in there, in terms of any overlooking from that property towards the new dwelling, would be in the form of a little window there, which is serving a bathroom, which will be obscure glaze. So there won't be any overlooking from here to the neighbour. It'll almost be the other way around, really, if anything. And that's already a garden, really, at the back, which could be used. And then there would be a condition, I think, to remove permitted development rights so that they can't put dormers in on the side under permitted development rights to prevent, again, any overlooking. So we've tried to cover that. Yeah, that's true, yeah. So even if they were built under permitted development, the legislation at the moment ensures that they, if they were fitted, were obscure glazed anyway to safeguard any neighbour's interests. So, but I think that there's a condition in there as well. Is there to remove PD? Yeah.
Okay, everybody happy with that? Now, Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Hayward. Thank you.
Just a small point, Chair. I can entirely understand the neighbours' objections to this. It's what we're used to hearing when we see applications like this. In actual fact, in reality, the amount of traffic movement is extremely small, and particularly when you consider that it is a through route. I don't think this is going to impact on the local area at all.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Hayward?
Thank you, Chair. Getting some officers' advice. I'm aware that there's a percentage of curtilage that you have to put in for a new property. There was a neighbour's concern that the rear of the garden might be used for further development. Can you just confirm that the size of the rear garden in this development complies with all our planning legislation as far as curtilage goes?
Sorry, Chair, we're just all looking blankly at each other. No, there is no requirement for specific plot sizes. It's each case on its merits. If you're talking about permitted development, there's limits on how much of your garden you can take up without needing planning permission, but that's something different altogether. So I'm not sure if you were thinking of that. But there's no actual guidance to say the garden must be X square metres or so many metres long.
I was just going back to a development we had either at the last meeting or the meeting before with that new property in Duchess Road, and there was a point that the neighbour brought up there. It was actually considered by committee, but I'm just going from memory from that one application.
I think we
Sorry, I'll take the officer's advice on that. I don't
only
know.
deal
I'm
with
just
what's
asking.
in front of us now here. It's hearsay to say about something in the future that we're
No,
not addressing now.
No, the point was brought up that it was one of the objections that it didn't fit in with legislation, and I wasn't sure what the legislation was.
Right. You wish to...
Yes, I'll move approval.
Very much. We now go to page 231. This is application 00854 and Trellick Cross near Trellick. Okay, Paula. Thank you.
Chair. This application seeks consent for a replacement dwelling at Fernley, Trellick Cross, Trellick. Members that visited yesterday, that's a picture of the existing property. The existing dwelling will be replaced by a 4-bedroom, 2-storey building influenced by late Georgian or early Victorian details and finishes. The new dwelling would be sited in the same location as the existing property and will use the existing vehicular access. The principle of a replacement dwelling is in accordance with policy H5 of the LDP, which allows the replacement of traditional dwellings provided they are not significantly important to the visual and intrinsic character of the landscape. In this case, the existing building has been developed over time from a small cottage to a large dwelling. The site is isolated and well screened. Therefore, the dwelling is not significantly important to the character of the landscape to warrant refusal of this application. The proposed dwelling will have a volume increase of 30%, which accords to what would be allowed as an extension to the existing dwelling and can be accommodated on this site easily without causing harm to the rural landscape. The site is largely surrounded by woodland and has a large mature garden bounded by mature high hedgerow. It is therefore considered that the proposed dwelling would not have an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the landscape and would not harm the natural beauty of the Wye Valley A1B. Officers therefore recommend approval of the application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you very much, Paula. Councillor Blakeborough, is this your ward? It is. Right, if you'd like to start. I'm very sorry indeed. I took my eye off the ball there, Mr. Thomas, because procedures have altered since he is an ex-county councillor sitting on the old planning committee. So you have to state your name, please, and you have 4 minutes.
That's right. My name is Ashley Thomas. I'm a community councillor on Trellick United Community Council, but I do not represent the Trellick area where this application is. I'm a councillor for Nandogo, but the local member couldn't come along today. The community council is rather concerned by this application. Not necessarily in terms of a total replacement, but what is proposed. It regards it as being somewhat out of character and the appearance not fitting the rural nature of the area, this area, part of the Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty. And I think probably the increase in size made it look much more like a monolith. So that was the other thing that they were anxious about. Now then, in this rural area, dwellings of significance are old cottages, farmhouses and barns. Most new development has been in the form of a significant number of barn and farm outbuilding conversions and restorations, ranging from the very small to substantial. They have contributed in no small way to the AONB purpose of protection and enhancement. The designation of the area of standing natural beauty of the Wye Valley has as its prime purpose the protection and enhancement of its nationally and internationally renowned landscape. This applies to the whole landscape, including its built development. There have been a number of developments over the years that have made no such impact. Yet, having received the stamp of planning approval, they are often then used as a standard for further development. The Community Council strongly feels that the current proposal falls short of enhancement. It would replace a building of some considerable existing character within the AONB with one which would have considerably less character and greater impact. It feels that it would therefore not have a neutral effect, but a negative one, contrary to the purpose of AONB designation. Mention is made in the report of existing screening, hedges, woodland and mature garden, but it should be remembered that such screening is never permanent and that it changes with the seasons and as the years go by. Leaves are shed, trees are felled. There is no, in an AONB, there is no special protection of trees unless specifically listed with single or group tree preservation orders or within a conservation area or SSSI, sites of special scientific interest. Now, enhancement in an AONB or in conservation areas is a clear and positive concept. Achieving it, though, requires care and determination. Too often it is treated as the elephant in the room, skirted around or even forgotten. And what we are left with is the concept of does no harm, an unambitious attempt to hover at neutral, but which, as the years go by, becomes the standard by which future developments are judged. We have many examples of that over the past 43 years since an AONB designation. The report to this committee makes no mention of enhancement, yet the protection of the aesthetic quality of our AONB depends on it. If we do not actively pursue that aim of enhancement, the Wye Valley AONB will continue to degrade. Slowly maybe, but that will be the trend. It will not hover at neutral. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Thomas. We now have Mr. Powell. Please state your name and you have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Lynn Powell of the RPS Group and I represent the applicant. Your office's very comprehensive committee report speaks for itself and really says it all, to be honest. Not only has your head of planning made the balanced planning judgment that is required of him, but he's also been supported by the other officers sitting by his side and also by your own biodiversity officer, by Natural Resources Wales, the Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, your highways officer and Dŵr Cymru. That's a pretty emphatic expression of support from a significant number of officers with individual areas of specialist expertise. What your report doesn't do, though, is refer to the very extensive pre-application discussions that took place with your officers before the application was submitted. Now, that's a very good and welcome system that allows your officers the opportunity to provide advice both on the principle of the proposal and on the details submitted at that stage. It's not a statutory requirement, but the applicants decided to follow that route because they wanted to be sure about their proposals before they, as I said, pressed the application button. The pre-application advice note was received on the 23rd of March of this year. It concluded that the principle of the proposal was acceptable, and I note that the Community Council accepts that. It also concluded the basic design ethos proposed to be adopted, that is largely Georgian, was also probably acceptable. It said that the proposed dwelling, however, should not be of a typical design that a typical mass house builder would produce, and that certainly is not the case. It also referred the applicant to the sensitivity of the landscape character and appearance of the AONB and said that should be recognised, and that it was also reasonable to take account of the extension that might be permissible under Policy 86 in considering what was the acceptable size of the replacement dwelling at this location. Having gone through the pre-application process, therefore, it would be somewhat invidious of the planning system, in my view, to then ignore or at least not take account of the conclusions that were reached, the advice that was imparted, and very importantly, the very clear guidance that was set for the applicant to progress into the application stage. The applicant is therefore led by the pre-application advice tendered to him or her by the authority. The application therefore is the result of that exercise and is being considered accordingly. In terms of the comments of the Community Council, they were made initially in July 2015. To be honest, they came somewhat as a surprise, not only because of what they said, but in particular because they weren't actually supported by any credible or submitted evidence, professional or otherwise. We have had a bit more detail today, but not sufficient, to be honest, to be regarded as evidence if we were to go to appeal, for instance. It is appreciated fully by the applicants that the pros and cons of architecture and design are very much subjective. We fully appreciate that. However, in the planning world, and we all work in the planning world, any judgments made need to be supported by fact, lest they are challenged or appealed. In this case, the comments made appear to be unsustainable and they are not anything but evidence-led. The applicant's agent did actually respond to the comments, however, in August. The point was made about there being no particular architectural merit in the house, or in particular no precedent. That wasn't the case at all. It was the decision to go down the Georgian and Victorian route was actually taken from your own conservation area guidelines in Trellick. The house that's been designed particularly is similar to the other examples that we found close to the application site. Annexed to the report that was submitted by the architects were photographs of other properties in the locality which were similar and had taken similar design references. Reference in particular was made to Beacon Lodge, and now the use of hipped roofs in particular is not uncommon in the locality. And also there were photographs shown of the cross next door, the Trellick House, the rectory, some properties outside Trellick on the road to Monmouth, and also properties on the approach to Catbrook. So therefore, the design considerations have been very carefully considered, I will. The architecture most final make was made by Graham Frecknell. I think you probably know Graham Frecknell. He's a very good architect in the locality. He's done a lot of work in conservation and in the design of sustainable new buildings. And therefore, whilst we fully appreciate the comments of the Community Council, we don't think they're relevant in this case. We don't think they've been supported by any evidence. Therefore, we would ask you to accept the recommendations of your officers. Thank you.
Right, several members were there yesterday anyway, so first of all, I will take Debbie Blakeborough, the local county councillor, then Councillor Dovey. Thank you.
I mean, first of all, I would support everything that Councillor Thomas has said. I think it's important that we do take into account it is in the Wyre Valley NOB. Now, the big gap in this report is there's no mention or comment or report from the AONB, and I think, you know, my minimum is we should be deferring this until we get some comment from them. They're the specialists. They'll be able to tell us whether it would have a negative, significant impact on an AONB. You will be able to see that as you look into the AONB. I mean, it's a nice build, but it would be better in Bath or somewhere like that. I think it is out of place, out of keeping. Yes, one could suggest this is subjective, and that's why I would say you go to the specialist, you go to the AONB and request them to put a report in, or at least to make comment before we can take this forward. Just in terms of the sizing, I know that it's increased to 170 square metres. Does that include the quite substantial hard-standing surround that it is going around the building? So the building is being increased, but at the minute there isn't any of this hard standing that will be looking to develop in the future, really. So what is the square meterage, including the hard standing? Because that has an impact. That is a carving out of that area, which will be seen from some distance. Just also in terms of putting this into perspective, if we go back about 3 or 4 years, when there was great discussion on the yurts. Now, there was a visual impact assessment done on whether one small yurt wooden base should be allowed or not, and it came back, it's not allowed. And that one small wooden base is very different to this huge, what I would say, out of character build.
Excuse me, is it 1,062 square metres on page 233? The existing dwelling.
Does that include the whole
cubic meters?
Yes, yes, square
Well, no,
volume.
yeah, well, when I'm it helps me to be able to make my decision. But I will be refusing this, or at least deferring it until we get some comment from the OMB on this, because it is quite significant.
Thank you. That's what the local member says.
Chair, sorry, can I just comment on that one point? During my first couple of weeks here, I met with the AONB officer to clarify that side of things, how it works with the planning consultations. And what I'm told, what my understanding is they pick up all the applications off the weekly list. They're perfectly happy with that system, and they will comment on any that they're interested in. And he was very clear that they don't comment on everything. They're not interested in everything. And if they haven't commented, it's because they don't think it's a wider issue. If committee wants, we can double check that is the case. But that was the very clear indication from him when I met him. As far as I'm aware, that's the system they're happy with, and that's what they've chosen.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I don't agree with Councillor Blakeborough. Yesterday, when we were there, we sort of paced out the floor plan of it, and the difference is just marginal. So I don't think it's going to fall foul on those reasons. And the other thing is, it is not a house that is going to be seen from far and wide. It is in that shallow. There is no overlooking hills in front of it. It doesn't stand on an escarpment, so it is not going to have a huge impact on the surroundings. It isn't really. My feelings about it are, and I hear what was said by the gentleman earlier. I don't think it's an architecturally significant house in any way. I'm sure it's going to be a lovely home. I really am sure of that, but it isn't very significant. It isn't ambitious. It is. You could almost pull a house like that out of a design book nowadays. My fear about these Georgian houses that are going up, and I like Georgian houses, there are so many of them, and they in the main don't complement the heritage of Monmouthshire. I know it might well be said that there are Georgian houses in Monmouthshire, and it takes its cues from those, but that is probably because we're allowing a lot of Georgian-style houses to be built. Trellick is a good example. And I think that's a shame. I think we should hopefully architects will look at what we have in Monmouthshire that is individual to Monmouthshire from our past and pick up on some of those cues. So I'm disappointed about that, and I think we're losing some of the heritage of Monmouthshire, and I think we ought to look at that. I applaud ambitious design. We have a number of houses that we have visited in Monmouthshire that are really high-tech, and they are very good, and you can't say that this is an ambitious design. Having said that, I'm sure there is no real reason that we should not allow this house to be approved. My main concern there yesterday was the woodland around there, and I really want some reassurance on this, because when I was coming out, I noticed that there had been some tree felling, and some really mature trees had been cut down there. And I want to know that we have a grip on is it arboreal content of that setting, and that we know what is being felled in the future and what is not. Thank you, Madam
Councillor
Chairman.
Dovey. Do you wish to comment, any officer, on the trees?
We're just having a quick check on details, Chair, if that's right. There's no protected trees within the Kirchleys of the site. Paul has brought up the overlay on our GIS system. So there's no tree preservation orders there. So nothing in planning terms stopping the felling of trees. We can certainly ask our tree officer to have a look at the site and see if he thinks those trees should be protected in the future. But yeah, there's no impact from this proposal on those.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Francis Taylor, then Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. I think, firstly, it's important to note that personal taste is not a planning issue, but I have to say, it certainly wouldn't be my choice. The choice of design. That said, in terms of our policy around replacement dwelling in the open countryside, where we say it is acceptable to have up to 30% increase in size, dependent on kind of the starting point for the building. So usually the bigger the starting point, the less increase we allow. So if we've already got quite a large building, we don't, we tend not to. This is over 30%, and one would anticipate that in the first instance, it is quite a large property, isn't it? It's quite a significant. It's not like we're going from a cottage to a, So that's when we are, in this particular instance, because we think the site is big, allowing just over 30%. That's correct, is it? Because I pick up Councillor, that then would seem to me to start to kind of trigger some of Councillor Blakeborough's points, that if we are allowing, we're supposed to have a positive and enhanced impact on the AONB. If we're allowing a more than large dwelling to go there, then I wonder if that then sort of triggers some concerns, and we ought to get the view of the AONB. I appreciated what Mark says around them picking up things they're particularly interested in, but one imagines, like sometimes we get, there can be an instance where something isn't picked up. For example, we might not have a comment from one of the consultees. So I don't necessarily see any harm in asking for that to come forward. If it's, it is quite, would seem to be, in terms of our requirements around general design considerations, we want high quality, sustainable design. Again, that's a matter of taste or, personal point of view, isn't it? But I have to say, I would wonder whether there isn't something more appropriate that, if one does want to put a replacement dwelling there, that ought to go there in design terms in that particular setting, which would appear to be relatively prominent. You know, we're talking about respecting the natural environment and attractive or distinctive landscapes, which is what the AONB is. And I'm not sure that this design at all, you know, I think, you know, sometimes Councillor Clark kind of, what's the term you often use? It won't come to mind. Yes, banal.
Well, the property that is there now is extremely banal.
Do you think so?
Yes,
I say it's banal. I disagree. Yes, you're right, I rarely am. I'm afraid I can't accommodate your times, Chair, Vice Chair. Anyway, I personally think that we ought to ask the AONB for their comments and views.
Councillor Dovey, you've spoken. I have Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Hayward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on some of the points that have been raised, I certainly agree with Councillor Clark. The property itself doesn't really lend anything at all, in my opinion. There are other properties in the area that are very similar. There's a farmhouse just over the hill, which is slightly smaller but almost identical. I was concerned about the trees that have been cut down, but there'd have to be wholesale slaughter of the woodland behind it before there was any landscape issue regarding the trees. It's on a large plot which will accept the new property without any problems that I can see. So I would be happy to recommend that we approve the application, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Hayward?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I agree with Councillor Taylor when she says that personal preferences or how it fits in is not important. I think that we always look at how a property fits in with the street scene or how it fits in with surrounding properties. And I think the general appearance is a planning issue that is important. The other thing I take objection to the developer about is when he said that because he took pre-planning advice from an officer, therefore we were obliged to pass it. That is not the case, and I think officers should make that quite clear, that pre-planning advice is pre-planning and it doesn't prejudge what the committee should be deciding. In this property, there are two significant buildings. We're pulling down, it may not be the best looking building in the world, but it is a significant building in the landscape. It's been a long time. It's not a property that's just been thrown up and needs to be replaced, and it's being replaced with a substantial building. Whether it fits in with the street scene, I think, is an important factor which the ANOB should consider. And I think that the fact that they've been given the choice and they've decided not to apply, it's rather a negative thing. We haven't got confirmation that they had received it or anything there. And if Councillor Blakeburn wants to propose that we actually defer this until we have a comment back from the ANOB, I'd be prepared to second that, because I think that would be a sensible decision to take. Thank you, Chair.
Before I take you, Councillor Blakeburn, Councillor Evans, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was on site yesterday and I had a good look around. And yes, I did see a lot of trees cut down, and I thought, well, is this right? But it's the applicant's land. We are not there to dictate on what they can do on their land. Right? And I've listened, and over the last months, Madam Chair, when we've had applications come in front of us, and we should be dealing with what's in front of us, not what it might look up the road or what happened 2 months ago. We should be looking at what's in front of us. And if Councillor Murphy wants a seconder to his proposal, I'm quite happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Blakeburn again.
Yeah, I mean, just coming back on the AONB, I am aware that AONB aren't just covering Monmouthshire. They have a lot of applications going through. For my peace of mind, I would like to defer this just to get comment from the AONB. If you are confident that it'll come past positive, then, you know, we're only looking at a couple of weeks. But I want the peace of mind that AONB is saying this is not having a detrimental impact on the Wye Valley and AONB. So if I could just defer to get comment.
Thank you. Mark will reply, I believe.
Chair, I was just going to suggest if members were minded to go down that route, would they be happy with the decision being delegated to either myself or the delegated panel if there's no objection from the AONB? And we just bring it back to committee if there is an objection.
If there is no objection from the AONB, you mean? We come to delegation panel. Are you happy with that, Councillor Blakeborough?
Would I be able to get a copy of that?
Yes, Chair, absolutely.
Yeah. So Councillor Blakeborough, being the local member, wishes for it to get comments from the AONB. And would you prefer it to come to delegated panel and then feedback, or do we want to go for an approval as stated in the recommendation today? As the recommendation stands, because it's been proposed to be approved and it has been had a second. So could I have a show of hands for approval first, please?
Six for approval, Chair.
And those to defer it for the delegation panel after having comments from the AONB.
No, the first recommendation raised was to approve.
All right, and the second.
The first recommendation was for approval. The second one, were you happy that we will have comments from the AONB and then those comments fed back to delegation panel, and if the AONB are happy that it should be approved, do you abide by that recommendation?
Yes.
So you happy to vote on that?
The AONB has been consulted, and if they're happy, then I'm happy, yeah, basically.
Okay, so there's 5 for that, Chairman, so the application is going to be
Approved.
So
Thank you for that. We will now go to page 129, and this is at Tintern again. St Arvans, Tintern Road, St Arvans. Yeah. Well, they've got to present it first.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Yeah. If you recall, this was deferred back at the August. Okay? This was deferred at the August meeting to provide an opportunity for the applicant to submit additional green infrastructure mitigation to integrate the unauthorised repair garage use into this sensitive landscape, also within the AONB. And this was required, according to the minutes, by the October Planning Committee meeting. At the time of writing that report, and indeed at present, the mitigation proposals have not been received. There is an item in late correspondence, a request from the agent to request deferral to give them additional time, and they suggest that that's one of the reasons is that they haven't been able to get hold of our own countryside staff to get some guidance on what should go into the green infrastructure mitigation plan. I would comment that they've had a full 2 months to provide this green infrastructure plan, and the request for advice from the countryside team wasn't requested until 5, maybe 6 weeks into the process. So I think, in view of that, we think they've had ample time to actually provide that information, and we feel that the recommendation, we would put forward the recommendation to refuse that was raised in October but revised in this current report to reflect an additional planning policy reason from the LDP relating to tourism and impact on tourism. So we would recommend refusal of the application due to the fact that we haven't received the necessary GI mitigation information.
Thank you for that explanation, Phil. I think this has been rather a drawn-out application. We've discussed it, and I do think that as we have given them every opportunity to come back, they knew what was requested. So I will take comments from the rest of the committee first before we take a vote. Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Evans.
I agree entirely with what you've just said, Chair, and I move refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Evans, then Councillor Dovey.
Yes, Madam Chair, I agree with everything that's been said. I would go along with the recommendation. I would second the proposal.
Councillor Dovey? Take a vote on the recommendation for refusal. Those are unanimous, right, thank you. We now go to page 179, 5 Lanes, Cowent.
Thanks, Chair. This application seeks permission for the conversion of redundant stone barns at 5 Lanes Farm, Cowent, into 2 dwellings. The site is located west of the road from Carrow Hill to the A48 within open countryside. The barns are separated from the farmhouse by an access yard area. The proposal is presented to Planning Committee as the applicant is a close relative of an elected member. The site is within open countryside where Policy H4 permits such development subject to various criteria. The barns are structurally sound and the proposal utilises the existing form, bulk and design of the buildings and respects the rural character and design of the barns. The proposed curtilage and access are within the existing access yard area. They're in scale and sympathy with the surrounding landscape and do not require ancillary buildings or unsightly infrastructure. The proposal is therefore considered to accord with Policy H4. The proposal is a sensitive conversion which would have a limited impact on the surrounding countryside and would not cause unacceptable harm to the amenities and privacy of surrounding residential properties. Officers therefore recommend approval of the application subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Thank you, Paula. Local member, I believe, is Councillor Murphy. And
Yes.
most of us were there yesterday, so we've all got a good idea of the layout of these barns. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got no difficulty with this application. The rest of the work that's been done on that site has been done very sensitively. It's been discussed at length by the Community Council who are more than happy with it, and I've received no objections whatsoever from local residents. So I'd be quite happy if it was approved by committee.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Anybody else wish to comment before we go to the vote? No, recommendation for approval then from Councillor Murphy. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Evans. Show of hands for approval, please.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. With committee's permission, could we take this and application 392 together? They're 2 separate reserve matters applications, but for the same wider site. So it's half the site for Barrett, David Wilson, and the other half the site for Taylor Wimpey. But all of the issues are the same. We've considered them together. They've been designed together. So if we present on them together and discuss them in that way, it's probably easier.
If that's what you advise, I'm quite happy to take your advice on that, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As members will be aware, this site is a housing allocation off Wannistow Road in Monmouth. It's reserve matters applications for the details of the housing. So outline consent's already been granted for this part of the LDP allocation. So it's allocated, the wider site in the LDP is allocated for 450 homes, which is the area you see on the plan before you, and the Druin Farm site to the north, and that's under policy SAH4 in your LDPs. So this application for the reserve matters is for 340 homes, which includes 102 affordable dwellings, which is 30%. So I'll come to that point in a little bit. And that's split. 166 of the homes are Taylor Wimpey, and 174 are Barrett's / David Wilson. So I'll run through some of the highlights of the scheme, Chair, and the benefits of the proposal, and key points, and then again with your agreement, Joe will come in with some of the detailed points and information about the planning conditions. So as I mentioned, it's 340 homes, entirely in accordance with the LDP allocation for residential developments and in accordance with the outline consent that committee's already approved. Some major contribution to our housing supply, which you'll have seen from the annual monitoring report, is needed to come forward now. And it also opens up the site for the development to the northeast of this plan. So the top right-hand corner of this plan, where the key is, there's a couple of roads going up to the edge of the site, and they would link into the Druin Farm site. So that opens up that site, which is owned by a separate developer, and provides the access roads into them. It also provides the access roads to the south of the site, which opens up the employment. And as we mentioned at the last committee, there's already significant interest from employment users to go onto that land, and one application's in with us now. As you'll have seen, hopefully from the boards on the foyer landing, there's been substantial revisions and improvements to the scheme as it's come through, which Joe will touch on in a few minutes. But we thought it was important to show you that what comes to committee isn't just what's landed in our desks at the beginning. There's an awful lot of work that goes on, probably behind the scenes a lot of the time, and an awful lot of improvements and changes agreed between us and the developer on this. So we're really pleased with what's before you now. In drainage terms, that's probably the key issue for the site. Again, Joe will go through in the detail, but the summary is Natural Resources Wales is happy with what's proposed. They've been fully consulted on how the scheme will work. The key points to highlight are the site deals with its own surface water drainage in terms of mitigating it to a greenfield rate. And towards the right-hand side of this plan is an area of surface water drainage features, lagoons and swales, which doubles up not only as a drainage management feature, but also as green infrastructure feature. The capacity of this is in excess of 6,000 cubic metres, and the site itself actually needs around about 3,000 cubic metres. So it's a considerable betterment. It deals with its own sort of capacity, and then also caters for surface water coming off surrounding land. To give you a bit of a concept of what those measurements mean, at a rough calculation, the 6-lane swimming pool at Monmouth Comp is around about 450 cubic metres. So if that gives you an idea how much 6,000 cubic metres of storage is, it's a lot. What's proposed gives us a betterment in terms of what's currently the situation, and also factors in the development to the north, the Druin Farm site. So gives an option for draining that site via this. So as I said, NRW is happy. They'd have to have land drainage consent from Natural Resources Wales anyway, but they've come back on our consultations. In terms of access, the key points are the improved footpaths along Wannistow Road, which committee looked at last time. From the outline consent, as a quick recap, there's £200,000 contribution to public transport improvements, and £100,000 towards footpath improvements, which links into the William Fields Lane. As part of this application, there's a new footpath that runs from the housing site to Wannistow Road. If you go back a plan, Phil. Go down to.
Sorry.
Just on the left-hand side of this plan, the centre of this plan, there's a little green stub underneath the blue area. So that's where the path would run down to Wonastow Road, left a bit. That one there, Joe?
Yeah, it's dotted. You've got
here.
Oh, it's a dotted link, yeah, sorry.
And it goes down the side of where when the employment integration comes in. So that's the link that links down.
Yeah, so it's where this orange dash line is.
Yeah.
And that links the whole way down to Wonastow Road as another route through for future residents. Again, highlights in terms of green infrastructure. This has been one of the key issues we've been debating as officers. The majority of trees and hedges currently there will be retained. There's more than 250 new trees to be planted and over 1 kilometre of new hedge to be planted. So some really significant biodiversity and green infrastructure improvements. And that links into leisure aspirations as well as ecology issues with, in particular, the dormice in the area. As I mentioned, there's this multifunctional wetland area providing leisure, ecology and green infrastructure and drainage. There's the routes through the site, which Joe will touch on in terms of the site layout. And then, again, back to the Section 106, just as a reminder, there's £1 million contribution towards adult recreation. So some real benefits from the site coming forward. The design of the scheme's been worked up to be a village-type environment. So there's the central public open space with the properties fronting onto it, key routes through the site, and the way in which the materials and the design of the scheme's been improved. So standard house types that these house builders normally come up with have been tweaked, and things like chimneys added to some key plots, materials amended. So we've got a high quality clay brick, a roof tile that looks like a slate, and 2 render colours agreed by us as officers, which are cream and a terracotta colour. And then in terms of parking, again, Highways are happy with the scheme. We've had extensive negotiations with the developer, so all the plots have got the on-site parking that they need. There's a couple of instances where we've been able to be a bit pragmatic, but they're where there wouldn't be sort of overspill parking onto the main highways through the site. So that's my bit done, Chair. We think there's a lot of benefits to the proposal coming forward, and we're really pleased with how negotiations have worked and the scheme that's before us now. But if Joe wants to take us through some of the other design elements and improvements and the details on the conditions.
Thank you, Mark, because I'm sure Jo can add a lot. She's had a lot of sleepless nights, I think, over this, because it is a big development and a big development for Monmouthshire. So I'm sure a lot of you, especially the local member, will have questions. Do you want to take some questions first, Jo, or do you want to comment first on it?
Do you want to, yeah? Do you want to dwell on that one, or shall we move on? I mean, some of the open space.
When the original scheme came in, I hope you all had a chance to have a look at it on the landing. It was quite a lot different from this. It was very much driven by engineering. You had the standard adoptable road that went all the way through the site, and you had what you could argue is detached boxes just with the standard spacing in between. It wasn't very inspirational. It wasn't what we were looking at creating. So it sort of went back to the drawing board, really, and we worked with the developers and the architects who acted on the behalf of the developers. And the green infrastructure was a major steer, because what is regarded as possibly a constraint in the whole scheme was developed as an opportunity. So the hedgerows were turned about, and the hedgerows stopped being the rear of people's gardens. They actually became links. So the idea was the central open space formed the main centre, where the hub of where the community would come back to, and with all links going into and out of that central space. So if you look at the hedgerow going north of the open space, that now forms a link that links into, that's right, yeah, that keeps going. So you've got the same replicator going to the southeast, which links the main central open space to the big strategic area, and the same to the southwest. And you've got spaces that come, so you've actually got main links that, yeah, that's correct. And there's been other little footpaths that have been added just to create more interest points. So you've got That's right. So that accommodates the footpath that traverses the site. So that connects the sink-in, which we walked along yesterday on the site inspection, to the west of the site, which takes you to the fields beyond. And you're not contained to an engineering frontage. You're actually taking in what is naturally great about the site now and has actually become celebrated as part of the overall layout. What doesn't show on there is there's obviously a strategic open space which is to the east of the site, and you've also got allotments. And what is maybe not clear in terms of that open space is, if you see you've got all those small ponds, they are the areas that fill up during the low water areas. In the higher water areas, the basin, which is demarcated by the line that goes around that, that's where your capacity comes in. But you've actually got boardwalks that go through that. So what is potentially was a huge issue and a huge problem with this site, or considered to be, has been addressed and overcome and integrated in the site as a real positive feature. If I move on to the street scenes, or in terms of the house types, huge efforts have been done. It's probably easier to do the before and after. Is the next slide a before, Phil? Yeah, that was Taylor Wimpey. It was very much dominated, and hopefully on the corridor you saw were the stories that you had a number of three-story properties. You had a smashing example of the one at the top, if we can go back there. They were what were going to accommodate the flats. There was quite a few of those blocks. They've been removed, they've been changed, they've been supplemented for a house type, which I'll feature in the next couple of slides. But the whole idea was to create diversity, to create interest, and to create a good traditional frontage with decent spaces, demarcated by hedgerows, with features that were constant throughout the house type.
Yeah, go to the next one.
Yeah. So here you've got the Barrett street scene, that's existing. Have you got the previous one, Phil, please? There you go, there's the original. So that's what it came in as. And if you revert back to what we are faced with now in terms of the main street scenes, you've got varying roof lines, you've got those fabulous chimneys, you've got details. All the houses are treated with the same hierarchy of windows, so there's consistency throughout the site. So whilst you've got quite a variety of house types, there is a uniformity in terms of the form and design. So in terms of the actual windows tucking in under the eaves, the lights, how the lights are used, you've got fan lights above the doors, the canopies you often see on these new estates, they've been removed so that the actual lights and the features of the house can be seen. There's garages have been moved forward and form a link, so you had not the standard space in between houses. Details that matter to a street scene, details that hopefully makes this site last for a long, long time. If we move on, Phil, please. That was the before. That's the materials layout. If we can skip that, because there are the materials have come down to quite a small number. The whole idea was just to create the warm colours that are very traditional in Monmouth, but not make the site too busy and let the design really stand out. So your design, you've got the clay brick, you've got 2 render types that are proposed, and they're not agreed, they were just considered acceptable by the officers. We have the roof tile, which was under considerable debate. I will go on to the roof tile later because I'm in no doubt it's going to come up. But I've done a lot of research on the roof tile. We all have our aspirations. If I had my way, it'd be natural slate throughout. I think the MD of Barrett would be sacked the day after for financially ruining the site. There is an issue with the cost of the slate. There are a number of dwellings that have come forward. When they originally came in, they came in with a Redland mini stonewalled, which is a much thicker, denser concrete block slate, well, tile, if you can call it that. And what they've done is they've tried to compromise. They've listened to us. They can see where the concerns are, and they've come in with a roof material that tries to derive the image of the actual thinner edge. The blue colour, which is presented there, has got a more textured look to it, and it sits more comfortably with the brick and the render. I believe if we give close attention to the edging on the roofs, on the gables. I think how that's treated is very important. I think that will work in terms of achieving the traditional appearance we're looking at getting throughout this site. If I move on, Phil, please, to the house types. There was a before, a Taylor Wimpey site, hipped roof, to replace for a traditional pitched roof with a chimney. Just simple form, really simple form. If you look at the details, no fancy porches, just good traditional form in terms of your lights above the doors. Also, what the developers did, what the architects did, I asked them to lower the houses by a couple of soldier courses. And in certain cases, it's been done more than others. I think the minimum maybe 1 or 2, in other cases 3, 4, 5. And what they did, they effectively lowered the dwellings, so to create a more bespoke appearance and just settle it more comfortably into the site. What it didn't want created on this site was this standard house type, which you see could be anywhere in the country. So the whole idea was not only did design reflect what we tried to aspire to get in Monmouthshire, but also the actual form settled in more comfortably. Another before, I didn't deliberately do black and white in the before to make it look worse, but it was what we got. So we had the Eastdale. If you look, Phil, sorry, do you mind just popping back? They're really important. They're corner prop. They're houses that are situated on the corners, which are very prominent in the street scene. So they've got double faces. But if you look at the pitch, the roof, very shallow, features on the windows, just very uninspiring. And they've changed it. And what we got now is key plots with that feature. If we move on again, please. That was one of the block of flats proposed. I think it was 18 units, 18 one-bedroom flats in that unit. There was a few of these, and this is what we were faced with originally. This was how they were trying to squeeze their 35% in. This is how they were trying to squeeze their affordable component in. I know Shirley will come in with the fact that did not deliver in any shape or form what they wanted to achieve, what we needed to achieve in terms of affordable housing. But the design, I don't think, really was reflective of Monmouth. So a lot of work was done, and this is what it was changed to, a traditional walk-up flat. So that has the appearance in the street scene as being of a dwelling, very much similar to all the other dwellings, nothing different in any shape or form, just good design, good form, and that's how we've now accommodated the one-bedroom flats. Again, this is the only 3-storey unit which is situated towards the north of the site. It's part of the Barrett development. Is this one? But this is how it originally came in as, and this is what we've changed to. This is the design and how we tried to alter it, just so it reflects a larger dwelling. Again, with the same key design principles reflected in the other houses, but in this. So a good traditional pitch roof, got rid of the hips. Put some chimneys on there, and little details like the ghost windows on the gable just broke up the elevation. That was on a key plot. That was overlooking the strategic open space. As an example of how the detached units came in, especially if you look at the side elevation, it wouldn't have worked on the site. It was not visually the best thing, so we got it changed, and here's an example of just how it got changed to which. Yes, thank you, Phil. So that was replaced for that dwelling. That is now occupies that plot. So a lot of changes. If you give an example, I think I raised it in my report. It came in site layout E. I think the site layout was in a letter E. We're now on Y. I don't want to go to Z. I'm good on Y, but we're now at Y. So that reflects the number of changes that's happened and the amount of negotiation that's happened with this site. A lot of benefits added in terms of the overall design and the appearance of it. Are we done on slides?
Yeah. Chair, could I just come back really briefly as one thing I meant to mention about the affordable housing. There's a slight point to clarify on page 203 of the agenda. I'm using the big numbers at the bottom. If you're on the PDF version, it's 213 at the top on the page search feature. It's just to clarify, in paragraph 5.3, we set out the affordable housing, and on the third line it says 37 units for shared ownership, 65 for social rent. Just to clarify the details of that, to make sure it's right, because it does make a difference. It's The 35 shared equity is made up of 19 intermediate rent and 18 low-cost home ownership, and then 65% social rent. 65 social rent units, not percent. So 19 intermediate rent, 18 low-cost home ownership, 65 social rent. So the numbers are still the same, but it's important just to clarify that breakdown of units.
Thank you, Mark. Do you wish to take comments at all now, Joe, or anything else you wish to highlight?
Mark raised that we're considering 390 and 392 together, but also tagged on the end is 404 because, as you're probably all aware, conditions of discharge in a formal process now. And I thought to make it very transparent, particularly considering the certainly very contentious issues amongst it, including surface water drainage, that we put them as part of the committee report. So in addition to the consideration of reserve matters, there's a consideration of the discharge of conditions from the outline consent, which covers the issues of surface water drainage, green infrastructure and biodiversity. So I'm happy to carry on. If you want to break from my voice, I totally understand that. And you want to ask some questions, that's fine. It's over to you, Chair, what you wish to do.
Happy to carry on.
Chair, can we do that? Bring in another condition now? Because members of the public haven't had time, if they've looked at the agenda, they won't have seen those conditions on the agenda report. But 404 isn't in the agenda.
Yeah, Chair, the conditions are in the agenda. We're only presenting what's in the paperwork. So it's page 217 if you're on the electronic page numbers, or the big numbers at the bottom of the pages. It is page 207.
I haven't got that on my papers. I've 217 is
207 if you're on a paper copy.
Ah, right, okay, yeah.
Or it's 217 on the PDF version if you're using the little box at the top to find the pages.
I'm wondering if the local member wishes to comment before we carry on. Could give Joe's voice a rest. You wish to comment at all as yet, Councillor Wintle, or shall... I'll wait till the end. Right, thank you. Okay with you, Joe? On to conditions, yeah?
In the original outline consent, there are a number of pre-commencement conditions rather, the majority of which are addressed as part of this report. The only conditions that are pre-commencement conditions that are not addressed in this report, the details are not in yet, and they relate to arboricultural information regarding the trees, and the developers understandably are waiting to get an approval before that detailed spec comes in, and the construction management plan, which will be submitted individually by Taylor Wimpey and Barrett David Wilson, subsequent to the decision of how this application goes. But in the meantime, I will go through the number of conditions, the conditions that related to the outline, which are very relevant and are part of the overall consideration of the application. So if I start with arguably the most contentious, which is surface water drainage, they submitted additional information in July, and with that additional information came a number of figures, a number of details that were submitted via NRW, and importantly Mark Groves, who's from the Land Drainage Board, and they submitted information as a result of exactly what they specified they wished to see, to justify where the drainage strategy was and to justify that this development would not only accommodate the surface water drainage, but provide the betterment that was promised to be delivered as part of the outline scheme. As Mark has referred to earlier, NRW are now very happy with the scheme. They've come back and they've said approve. But if I just rerun just how it works in terms of what they've provided, obviously is the basin. And with that basin, they've provided over 6,000 cubic metres, half of which is going to deliver the surface water drainage to accommodate the site. The other bit is to accommodate the land flows that come from the surrounding land. And the site is made up of arguably, in the words of Mark Davies, who sadly can't be with us today, but he's the most complex drainage system, because the whole site is made up of channels and swales and drainage that leads not only from outside the site, but within the site, and leads back to the attenuation ponds. I think there's in excess of 20 land drainage consents that are required as a result of all the culverting and so on. So what they've done is they've not only accommodated their existing drainage, but they've provided the betterments. The issue, as I've learned, is the rate of discharge, and they're confident now that the rate of discharge, that the attenuation can be provided on site, but the rate of discharge is at a rate which is controlled and is acceptable and provides the betterment that's been promised. It's worth noting that in addition to this, there are the legal agreements that go on with highways, yet to be agreed, but it's to do with the maintenance and management of the highway infrastructure, which will now be maintained and managed much more rigorously. So there will be improvements within the highway infrastructure, which already exists now, but there will be improvements in terms of the surface water drainage, which has been comprehensively planned for and extensively thought out, and has been subject to quite significant scrutiny from not only our drainage officer here, but from the relevant person who makes a decision, and that's a chap from the Land Drainage Board, who's now under the umbrella of National Resources Wales. So the recommendation is to discharge the condition, or partially discharge the condition, because it relates to the reserved matters. You're going to be faced with this with the employment site as well, I'm afraid. They too have to run through the process of discharging the surface water drainage conditions, ecology conditions and so on. But the recommendation is to discharge that condition. Shall I carry on, or is there any questions?
Carry on, please.
Condition 7 is pedestrian footway and cycleway to Drone Farm. That's shown through the link up in the northeast of the site. It was a requirement that there was a pedestrian link, and there was a link to the cycleway, which eventually linked up via Waterview Lane to the Offers Dyke. All parts of the green infrastructure strategy, and they've delivered that. So the recommendation is to discharge that condition also. Decals of footways and cycleways. Well, this was subject to change as part of the application, because there was no direct pedestrian access from the site. If you remember, you can recall, you dealt with the access details in the last committee. The developers have changed the red line. They altered the red line to provide a new public footway that goes along to the east of Model Farm. It will go, as indicated earlier on, from the strategic open space. It will run alongside where the attenuation is shown on the outline for the employment site, and will run down the hedgerow and meet Wannistow Road. So it's an attractive walkway. It's an attractive walkway that takes in the best of the site. There are also obviously the cycleways and the pedestrian points within the site. It is worth noting, if I go back to the original layout, Phil, if you don't mind, it's already up, there are a number of links to outside the site. So not only have you got good links within the site, you've got links outside the site, which runs on to the point, not only have you got the one to Wannistow Road, which the developers will now provide it, now going to be maintained by a management company as part of this development. You've got links to the southwest of the site, which links in, proposed link to the site west of the site. You've got another link on the western part of the site that links in with an existing footway. That is the existing footpath that runs across from the sink to the east of the site. So across from the sink, Phil, the east, that's it. And there are also, can you scroll across please to the next slide? You just see the strategic open space. You'll see the orange lines denote footpaths, and you'll see a link up to the open space just above the strategic open area. I highlighted as blue. So, and you see the arrow? That's it, yeah, that's it. So there are really good links to the outside of the site, as well as good linkages within. So that condition is recommended also to be approved or discharged. Not approved, it's a discharge of the condition. The details now considered to be acceptable. Programme of archaeological work, scheme's been provided, GGAT have agreed it, again partial discharge, they need to see the final report before they can fully discharge that. The Green Infrastructure Management Plan, well that should be in your late correspondence. that was held off from final comment in the agenda within the original one sent off because there was a couple of details that was subject to negotiation right to the end. A couple of details just needed to sort it out. It related to the actual cutting schedules, the maintenance strategies, and basically ensuring that the green infrastructure we worked very hard to get into the site was maintained and continued to flourish, and 20 years beyond was matured and worked as overall the site. So there's tweaks within the management plan and in terms of the overall scheme that we needed to get sorted. It has been sorted. NRW have come back and have now accepted the green infrastructure management plan as acceptable, as has our green infrastructure team, who've worked very, very closely on this scheme. Exactly the same with the Dormice method statement. There are certain issues regarding for example, the hedgerows are now to be transplanted. They have to go to the trouble of transplanting the hedgerows rather than cutting down and starting new. That was a requirement of the Dormice strategy, which has been changed very recently. So there are a number of extra stuff that they've had to do within the recent weeks, which now results in NRW now giving an okay. Scheme's fine, scheme's acceptable. They're happy to approve, as does our green infrastructure team. So again, condition 10 and condition 11, which is your green infrastructure management plan and your Dormice method statement, recommended that they should be partially discharged because again, they relate to the employment site and they also have to do the same. Construction environment management plan, very much crossover with the earlier issues, considered to be acceptable by our, that policy was, that condition was imposed by our, internally by our own officers. They're happy that the scheme now provides what they need, and that's been recommended to be discharged, as has the biodiversity monitoring strategy. The landscape plans, which form part of the GI, are now acceptable. They are now at the point that are now acceptable and recommended for partial discharge, as have the details of earthworks and timetable for implementation. The boundary materials, they've come in with a full scheme for the enclosures. As part of the major changes we've done with the scheme was we tried to demarcate as many front boundaries as we possibly can, so people have their own defined space, their own defined front garden. They've got a hedgerow. It adds to the green space. I think there were only 2 houses, the front onto the highway, and there's like a natural stone cock and hen wall. The rest of the site is everything in the public domain is either hedgerows or it's a stone wall, and in certain cases there are a few railings applied. The rear boundaries are close bordered fences and panel fences, but they're very much out of view. Anything within the public domain is being considered very carefully to ensure that it works well within the street scene. So again, that's recommended for discharge. And the Welsh Water have agreed that the hydraulic modelling assessment, I'm going to go verbatim here, is acceptable. And therefore, given that the other conditions still stand on the outline, they're happy for that condition to be discharged also. Done.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much.
Chair, does it?
Sorry, go on, Mark.
I was going to say, does it help at this juncture if I just clarify? So there's, I think, 4 separate applications there. Okay, we'll debate that. There's 2 reserve matters, so 390 and 392, and then application 404. I only said 4, Joe, because there's 2 reference numbers at the top.
I do apologise. Yeah, you're right, spot on. The archaeological condition was submitted separately as a discharge of condition, and that's given the other reference. I do apologise, you are correct.
Yes, there's application 390, 392, both of those are reserve matters. 404, which is lots of conditions, and 921, which is just archaeology. And the officer recommendation is for all of those to be approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your contributions to that. I know it's been a great deal of work because it is a big development in Monmouthshire. Councillor Wintle, local member.
We still haven't done anything about the 30 to 35%. You're going to say just now, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, I hadn't covered that. The point was made at the start of the meeting that policy start is 35% for this site, and what we're proposing to you for approval is 30%. So it's 102 units out of 340, so it's bang on 30. I think the reasons for that are covered in the report, and it's to do with the design improvements and the lower density than the LDP allows for, and the impacts of that on viability. So in a nutshell, by us negotiating all of these improvements, in particular to the layout, so they got 340 units as opposed to 370, which is I think what the LDP anticipated for this part of the site. We've got less. In addition, what was proposed for affordable housing with the more dense block of flats, aside from the design point of view, I think I'm right in saying didn't do what we needed it to do from a housing need point of view. So we have discussed it in detail with Shirley to make sure what's proposed does actually serve the communities that we're trying to serve. But that's the reasoning for it. So as officers, we're happy that the 30% is fully justified. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting, the LDP policies do allow for that. They do allow for site-by-site viability considerations to be taken on board. So that's what we've done in this case. I'm not sure if Shirley had any detail to add on the affordable need.
Do you wish to comment on that now, Shirley?
I know what we had originally, you could see the design was dreadful, far too many flats together, would have been a management nightmare. We've now got smaller units of flats, which is much better. The tenure was all wrong originally. We had far too many intermediate rent, which just wouldn't be affordable for the people on our waiting list. So now we have got a tenure that better meets our need. And we have had to drop that 5%, but I think it's worth it for the overall site that we've got now.
Thank you, Shirley. Councillor Wintle wish to speak again?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, yes, I am disappointed that we haven't got the 35%. This is a large site. Monmouth and its surrounding areas is desperately short of housing for the low-cost housing. If we don't get it on sites like this, we're not going to achieve. And once again, we'll be criticised for not achieving our housing sort of quotas. There's over 3,000 people on the waiting lists for low-cost housing. So as I say, if we can't get it on a site like this, we're never going to get it. So large developers now, why should they get 30% when smaller developers are having to go 35? You know, this is where we're setting a sort of precedent here, and I'm rather concerned about that. In fact, I'm very unhappy about it, but this is what we seem to get. Also, we get no input into this discussion on about 30 or 35%. Yet we had to pass the LDP, and it was 35%. We said in the LDP, and we all had our input into that, but no input into reductions. This just does seem rather strange. But anyhow, moving on from that, the holding hedge. You say they don't know who owns the edge between Model Farm and I believe it's Councillor White's husband's farm. I think you'll find that he knows exactly who owns that hedge. It's him. So if they haven't bothered to talk to him, that's their problem. Because I know he's quite livid about it. Especially the fact that his farming is he's a suckler beef herd with mainly continental breeds. Now they're very unpredictable animals, especially when you've got females with offspring. They're unpredictable and very protective of the youngsters. So you're putting a footpath, or potentially trying to put a footpath through that hedge into the field. And he's going on previous developments, which I've got another large one, even larger than this, in my ward. These people think they can let the dogs roam free and and walk all over it and make a right mess. But these cows won't allow that. In fact, I don't want to see or hear that anybody's been injured, but I'm afraid there's been quite a bit of it in the agricultural papers and the normal papers of people, because they got dogs running loose, getting injured.
One lady got killed.
Yeah, exactly. I even met a relative who's handling stock. And just because the calf beat it when he was moving it, the cow turned on him and crushed him against the wall. That's what can happen. And so for us to allow a footpath through to allow people into that area, because they've got to graze the cows, and that's the whole idea. He's been there a long time, and all this is all new. Yes, there is a footpath through there, but you wouldn't get the same quantity of people going around to the end of the road, once the road, and walking back through. So I think it's rather irresponsible, and I wonder how we would stand on the legal side of it if somebody did get injured.
I don't think the council would be liable in those circumstances, if that's what your question is, Councillor Wintle. As regards this footpath, as you correctly point out, that footpath is there, and it's going over that field. So we'll have to see, as time goes on now, what can be done to get this, what I understand is an important link between the proposed development and the present footpath 51.
There are other footpaths in that area going away and across to Watery Lane, which need tidying up because they are a mess. But we don't seem to bother with that. Also, cycleways to Watery Lane. The off-side footpath goes down Watery Lane, but at the bottom of Watery Lane, the footpath goes on, and it's a footpath, not a cycle track, which residents on the other site seem to think. It's so. Once again, we're putting people in that direction. They won't walk. They won't go up. They want to go. They want to ride up through the woods and things like that, which is it's a lovely area. I would have preferred to seen this site, where you could see the rest of it around, so you can see it better and understand the site in better. But once again, we've got just a site there, and the officers have given us a lot of information, but for us to sort of work out where this is happening or that's happening is difficult. I don't know whether it's made on purpose, but it would have been better if there had been other points that people could see in relation to Wonestall Road, to Watery Lane, Winnesfield Lane, and the like. But with this site, you just got... I'm glad that Joe has got some of those houses altered, because it was a mess. You've also got overlooking this site from up at the road coming out from Trellick. You'll also see it from the Kimmin. You also see it from up on the hill with the thing. So this is why we need a good site and then have it done properly. But I am disappointed with the loss of 5% and also potential this hole for the hedge, because knowing what some of these people are like, I don't know how long that gateway or style would last. And then you've got cattle coming through there onto this site. They love flowers.
Excuse me, my naivety, but where you say the footpath meets the hedge, is there a gate or stile going to be there? Because I don't see how there can be if the hedge belongs to somebody else. So there is a natural barrier there for them to continue going into the field?
There's a hedge and a fence.
But if it's a barrier and you could say no access, but there again, as most of you know, we used to farm quite close to this site, which we no longer do now, and there are no footpaths across there, but you were always getting people with dogs across there. We've had them cut holes in the fence, but there again, they do it at their own risk. It's a bit like children living near a highway. You don't say go and play with the traffic. They are all made aware of what the situation would be if they cross into the road. And I am sure the majority of people would take that on board if there are stock in a field. They have to take their own responsibility. But if there is no proper footpath across there, I do not see how they could, without great risk and knowledge themselves, to continue into the field.
That's exactly the point I'm making. So it seems ridiculous. We haven't heard anything about the sewerage. At one time there was supposed to be was it 5 million scheme going down the road to.
Still going ahead.
It's still going ahead, is it? I'm glad to hear that. That's glad to cause disruption.
The sewage, I'm aware that the foul sewage infrastructure is huge, absolutely huge. I know it connects by Waitrose, but Welsh Water confirmed that the drainage infrastructure will accommodate all 450 houses as well as the employment site. There's a lot of work going on off-site with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's as you thought.
Yeah, we've also got difficulties with this on the other site of greenfield runoff rates. Because the speed of water coming down off the hill, I promise Peter I won't say much about water, but the speed it comes down off there, it'll fill these ponds very quick, because as you can imagine, the length of Wannistow Road is usually underwater, because and that's a lot of water. That's even more than yours, the capacity on your ponds. I've got a feeling that people just haven't realised what it's like, and I'll enjoy saying, I told you so.
Thank you, Councillor Wintle. Anybody else wishing to comment now? Councillor Hayward. Does that help you now, Councillor Wintle?
Thank you, Chair. I wonder what was going on there. I don't know where to start. It's itty-bitty. There's so much wrong with this application that I could go on for hours, and I don't want to. I've already talked about the lack of infrastructure in the town, the lack of roads, the lack of parking, the lack of dentists, the lack of doctors, the fact that we're building a new comprehensive school, smaller than the present school, and yet we're introducing all these children here. But we've already given outline planning consent for this application. Joe spent a lot of time showing us before and after of the housing and saying how much we've improved it. And of course, all that was wasted because none of those drawings came before this committee. At the outline application stage, when I was complaining about the look of this site, I was told that's all in the detailed planning. This is just outline planning. We will not consider what those houses are looking at. So this is the first time we're seeing what the properties look like on Wannistow Road. They've been on the website for years, changing by the month. But it's the first time it's come before this committee, so all this thing about how much we've improved it is just flannel, because in fact this is the first design ever to come before this committee. Am I correct? Yes. I just want to concentrate on the history of the site and the major problems. When this site came forward first, you know it caused a lot of consternation, and the main consternation was about the density of housing, because we had 4 strategic sites in the LDP, and this was something like 20% more dense housing than the other 3 sites at Abergavenny, Chepstow, etc. And the inspector brought in Trewin to reduce the density of the housing, and that would automatically improve the aspect of the estate and get the better design, which Joe has taken credit for here with arguing with the developers. The second one was the flooding issue, which, as Mark Hand quite rightly points out, was a key issue on this site. We all know this site floods. We've seen photographs at the consultation stage of canoes canoeing on here, of a grass, which just a lake. And George Ashworth is quoted as saying, I was there at the meeting, it's all right, I can see blades of grass peering through the top of the water, so it must be okay then, mustn't it? But we know that this site floods. And the other aspect was the use of the land for the industrial estate, forcing all these people to walk to the industrial estate if they want to walk to town. This has been referred to as a village development. It's the first time I've heard that, but of course it's correct, because at the LDP stage, it was pointed out time and time again that this in fact was a development in the country. It's not an extension of Monmouth. It has green space or industrial land between these houses and every other house in Monmouth, and it should be treated as a development in the countryside. Now, of course, once the houses are built, we'll just infill the land either with industrial estates or with houses, and we'll just shift the boundary of the town further down the road and cause the problems. The road, initially, in the initial reports we had at the LDP stage, were that it needed a fortune spent on the roads because every one of the junctions going all the way into bridges needed upgrading. The developer then, or it wasn't the developer then, it was the owner, then produced another traffic report saying, no, that's not the case. By building 800 houses or 400 houses, we're in fact going to improve the traffic along this road, and we don't need to do anything. And now I see we have another report saying that at the very least we need to alter the junction at Wonostow Road and the Link Road to improve the traffic and the access onto the A40. And this has been one of the problems. Nothing's been taken off the website. If you go on the website, there are something like 30 or 40,000 pages of information. Some of it out of date, nothing's ever been taken off, and to find out what is the true state of what's on the website is very difficult and takes a lot of reading and a lot of looking at it, looking through the history of it. The flooding, we've been told now, is absolutely no problem. But of course, we've done that itty-bitty. The last application we came for this committee was designated access road. But of course, it also had the culverting of the Wonostow Brook, and it had the road going into the site showing a big bund which diverted all the water coming off Grey Hill, is it? The hills on the left here, White Hill.
Red Hill.
It'll be grey once all the water comes down, washes all the silt out. All the water coming off the hill there was diverted by the access road, which we approved last time, into the Wonostow Brook to the west of the estate. And my whole argument has been, why can't we see the whole of this development? The inspector bound this and Trewin together to reduce the density. It is one development, not two. It might be two lots of fields, but it's one development. Why can't we see this development in its entirety instead of bits and pieces? So when we had the outline planning, we weren't allowed to see what the houses were going to look like. When we had the access road coming in, we weren't allowed to see what the road layout in the site was. It just comes through in bits and pieces when we've forgotten what went on before and what has happened. At the LDP stage, much was made about the industrial site. Now, the industrial site on here is not new. This land belonged to WDA for 20 years. It's had planning permission for 20 years for an industrial estate on it. And no one, or commercial development, no one took up the application. And we were told, no, this is because it's not suitable, and what we need to do is to put 400 houses next to it so that those people will look for work and the industrial estate or business estate will thrive as a result. And therefore, we want these mixed developments, industry and labour. We were pointed out that it was in the countryside, we didn't want labour, and we were told categorically This is a high state-of-the-art industrial estate. We're looking at companies like Cisco and Google coming in here with high-speed internet access, and we're looking for high-value jobs in a special industrial estate, which would be the pride of Monmouthshire. So far, we've only had applications in from Siltbusters, so they can clean their wagons out, and somebody, I forget the other one. But we've already, since the LDP, changed this application, so instead of being B1, is now B1, B8. So a third of the industrial, or the other way around, I can't remember which it is, but a third of the industrial site is now for industrial use, not the high-tech industries that we look for. Now, how much further we keep changing? We've heard about we changed the affordable homes. How much before it comes 50-50? Because the people who are looking for space in Monmouth are people with big lorries, big storage areas, and looking for storage yards. Why are we using our high-tech industrial site for that? Now, it's not part of this application, but it should be. We should be looking at the whole application in its entirety so that we can see what is going on here. The report, now I don't know whether the report is up to date because we are told that there's not a problem with flooding. The report says it's okay, but quite clearly my report says the recommendation is a partial discharge of the condition. The condition could only be fully discharged on receipt of drainage proposals for the employment element of the overall site. We have never seen a drainage plan for the employment element. And yet here we are asking to put condition 5 in, the drainage, without having seen something that covers 13.7 hectares of drainage. And we've never seen the detail. How on earth can we release that condition? How can we grant this today without seeing that information? I'll quote another part of the report I got in front of me. It might be superseded, I don't know. In the interest of the wider allocations, it's appropriate for the local planning authority to ensure the following. The detailed design will be part of the technical approval of the NRW, will be appropriate to accommodate the needs of Drewin Farm site and other potential future development. We don't have the figures coming off from Drewin. All we have got are some theoretical figures, and we have two possibilities of dealing with them. One, a big drain going into a bigger drain in here, and one, I think, going off and floating across through the industrial estate somewhere. But we don't have the details of Drewin, except that it's got to come in here somehow, and somehow it'll either connect up with the attenuation pond, but definitely will connect up with the Wannerstow Brook, because that's the only place that's going to take water away from this site. And we're told with NRW now are convinced that there's a betterment. How can they be? We don't have the information. None of this information has been given. I've no doubt that in a month or 2 months' time, we'll have another condition here and say, well, it's all been agreed, and now they're happy with this, they're happy with that, they're happy with the other. But it's all itty-bitty, and we don't know what we are giving approval to. Thank you, Chair. I'm keeping this short. It could be all the other there. The other thing, which is quite rightly, which is in the report, and has been pointed out by a developer, by Bovis Homes, saying the site was acquired from South Wales Land Development at a fixed price. And I quote in word for word from the report. They are not the applicant for the reserved matter submission, etc. The acquisition cost, including the clawback payable to RIFW and the Welsh Government, took into account the 106 items. As above, the affordable housing, as proposed by MCC in May 2015 and agreed by Barrett Daly Wilson, when the price payable was fixed, is based on the cost assigned to affordable housing when the price payable was fixed. You cannot reduce the social housing. There's nothing wrong with flats. All the development going on in Monmouth at the moment, there are 32 flats going on at Dixton Road, there are 24 more flats going on in the hospital. So obviously there's some developers that think that flats will sell and are appropriate for social housing. Why do we have to reduce it here when the price was fixed? It's the result of an inquiry, because the AM for Bridgend thinks that the price charged to land development was too low and the Welsh Government had a bad deal out of it. They haven't got to do the road improvements going through. Everything was fixed. Why are we now letting them off this social housing? 5%. It's atrocious. It's wrong. So,
please wind up, Councillor Hayward.
Okay, you've heard it all before. I mean, I can go on all afternoon with results. what I think we should do is not approve this, and we should be telling our officers, please, please, please bring a detailed application of this Wannistow Road and Drewin as a winner, so we can see how we're going to destroy Monmouth and what is actually going to go on those two sites. Instead of bringing it in every month, a little bit more, a little bit of condition, an access road here, a drainage there. Can we please see this as one application so that we can make our minds up and see exactly what this application is about? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. I'm sure one of the officers, or perhaps several of them, wish to answer some of your concerns.
Chair, well, I've already explained in terms of affordable housing, but in terms of the context of the quote that was given, yeah, at a point in time, prices may well have been fixed and never looked at that. But what we've tried to explain is it's the design improvements and the other changes that we've negotiated. That's where things have changed. Well, plain devil's advocate, if you want to go back to the original scheme and those designs, we can have 35%. But we would strongly advise against that. We think what's now before us as a comprehensive scheme is much better. And it's not ideal, no, but the small cost in losing that 5% is worthwhile in the grand scheme of things. In terms of the rest of the comments, I haven't really got a lot to add because it's really going over all ground. The site's allocated in the LDP. That argument was had robustly made by various members, as I understand. I've seen the inspector's report, and the inspector's got a clear view on it. It is now in the adopted LDP. That's it. That's the end of that debate, I'm afraid. Outline planning permissions granted. So the principle, the issues about the infrastructure, that's all done and dusted. In terms of house designs, yeah, they weren't before committee before. That doesn't happen with an outline application. That's why you have these two-stage consents. So it outlined the principle of the housing was established, and the places where the access road will go into. And then since then, we've had the detail of the houses, the details of the access road. So it's not the case that anything's hidden from committee. That's why we're here now. This is your chance to approve the details of the house types, the layout, the density. The access road was approved at the last meeting as a standalone full application with the purpose of bringing forward the employment site. So there's no intention or any other activity trying to circumvent committee on these issues. That is the normal sequence of events, and it's perfectly appropriate and above board. The employment site will come forward separately as and when developers or businesses want to go on there. That isn't within the current applicant's control, so they can't give us those details. And the same with the land to the north, the Drewin Farm site. That's a separate house builder. But what we have done is make sure that the infrastructure is in place and can tie up for those. So the road links are there, the drainage connections are there. This site provides a surface water drainage option for Drewin Farm. There's scope within the employment site for that to be dealt with separately. Normally what you'd look for on a site is for it to mitigate its drainage, its surface water drainage to greenfield runoff rates. So in other words, the amount of runoff is at the same rate as if the site's undeveloped. So that's all perfectly achievable through these remaining parcels of land. And this scheme allows betterment, as we've been talking about in detail earlier. So I understand that the ward members are aggrieved that the site's coming forward for development, but most of those arguments are long gone. It's in the LDP, it's got outline consent. We're now looking at the detail of the scheme. And I commend the scheme to committee. I think it's a really positive step forward. So the officer recommendation is for approval.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. I think we've debated this a long time. It's been a long time. Yeah. I was just going to say, I am the adjoining ward member to this. So, but no, I will have my comments later. I will take Councillor Blakeburn and Councillor Taylor.
In terms of just looking at any development strategically, can I just get this cleared up? So the inspector during the LDP linked this development along with Trewin and said yes to 370 properties. Now, on this site, we're saying we've reduced it and we're saying 340. Does that mean when we come to Trewin, we're looking only at 30 houses on a 12-acre site?
Chair, no. The inspector's allocation for the sites together was 450. So it was looking at 370 for this bit, but it's now 340. So we've got 110 or so left. And that's assuming that can be properly accommodated on that site. If they can't achieve that density, then it'll be less.
Shirley, question for you. I mean, I do understand you pay for quality, and I think you can see the quality going into this site, the sustainability, the lifestyle, everything's been included within that. When looking at then affordable housing, and I absolutely take your point, sometimes it's about taking less but make sure it's sustainable and there's high quality. Is there therefore a risk, because bearing in mind it's 30% instead of 35%, and the last we had an application in Abergavenny where it went from 3 properties to 1 property, is there a risk of our seeking quality we're not going to meet our targets?
Well, we always knew that there was going to be viability issues for sites that came in at the start of the plan. So really achieving 30% on this site at this point in time is quite good. And there's actually 389 households in bands 1 to 4 on the Monmouth register that want to live in Monmouth. So we're providing 102 here and possibly a further 28 to 30 in Drewin. So we will be making quite a big inroads into that need.
And the affordable housing, is it pepper potted throughout the development?
Yes, it is.
It is. Yeah. And then finally, the drainage problem and flooding. I mean, I'm not an engineer, and I'm sort of looking at these reports. I guess I'm looking to you as officers. Are you 100% assured that the households on this development will not experience the impact of flooding?
I'm not a drainage engineer either, but I'm a planner. That's why I'm here. But that's what our expert consultees are telling us. So the chap from the Drainage Board, which is now part of Natural Resources Wales, there've been extensive conversations, emails, exchange of plans with them, and they have confirmed they're satisfied. So that's the best I can tell you.
And if there was flooding, who's responsible for helping these households?
Yeah. I mean, it is. You can never say never. Anyway, no matter where you live, we have houses on the side of hills in the valleys that flood, and people normally look at flat floodplains thinking it'll be them that has the problem. But yeah, it's. If there is a flooding issue, then ultimately, yes, it's via your insurance company, the same as anybody else.
Councillor Francis Taylor, please.
Thanks. Can I just... I know there's strategic open space there with the boarded, watery, looks a bit like Mega Marsh to me actually, which is quite nice. Can you just tell me, because I'm not very good at understanding, I've got this space here. Can you tell me roughly, so there's 2 pieces of space here on this, on the big site plan, which isn't watery, well, can you tell me roughly what sort of area, what surface area those are really?
Bigger than the rock in Horsestown.
Yes, but I want to sort of understand, because obviously I appreciate there's access to that strategic space, but to me that is still, it's very dense, dense with housing. I just wanted to understand. I mean, we're saying in your report that this is part of the strategic open space here, yes, in the centre there, because you say that there are 5 of the affordable houses It's very difficult to work out that that's where they were because the numbers are very small. But that's where 5 of the affordable houses are fronting onto. But what that doesn't look like a very big space to me. Can someone tell me roughly how big that space is? You know, what could you do on that space? And then, I mean, the other space looks an awful lot bigger as you go over there. But I just appreciate that the negotiations have been to reduce the density. But to me, that still looks pretty dense with houses with that space, you know, where they're concentrated. Can you? About is it really?
Twice as big as this chamber.
Would you say so?
Equated to how many houses are alongside it on the symbol?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was going to say that's the best way of explaining it. Along the top of the site, so sort of the northern edge of that park area, there's a terrace of 5 properties, then a gap for a path, and then a terrace of 3. So if you can imagine that in a street, it's pretty sizable. So yeah, 8 houses in total. So it's a good 40 metres, I would suggest.
And that's just going to be open space. There's no proposals to have springy chicken areas, which is a step forward, I feel, have to say. Okay, thank you. Can I ask, in terms of the off-site, the Section 106 agreement, because whilst it says it gives us some information, we don't have the detail of that. So what is the off-site adult recreation contribution? Because I do agree with some of what Bob says about, you know, we do get things in bits and pieces, and you know, we get so many applications, I can't remember the detail. So what is the off-site adult recreation? Off-site sustainability says about, ostensibly talks about the paths and then the surface water drainage. Is there no other, there's no other items in the Section 106 agreement, for example, it was deemed that there was no educational contribution required, there was no highway and transport contribution.
Yeah, Chair, there are highways and transport contributions, so there's 200,000.
It's not in the report though, is it?
No, sorry, the Section 106 is all agreed at the outline application stage, because that's when the council gives permission in principle for it. So what I mentioned earlier was just as a bit of more trying to be a helpful reminder, possibly I've muddied the waters. So yeah, at outline stage, the 106 is agreed, so that's all done. But that included 200,000 as a public transport subsidy, so to get buses into the site. So you've probably heard the phrase pump prime in it before. So you get the buses in and running, and then when there's enough residents, the idea is there's enough people using it to make it a self-sustaining. Otherwise, if everyone moves in until the bus is self-sustaining, they'll all be used to using their cars. So that's the concept. So 200,000 for that. There was 100,000 towards improving some footpath links to a part of the land next door whose name escapes me, but I'll find it in my notes. It's saying on here adult recreation was £2,898 per unit. So that it works out, it's round about £1 million for adult recreation off-site. In terms of, it's set out in the 106, the broad themes, and the 106 allows for it to go towards the enhanced swimming pool at Monmouth Comp. So where we're planning to build it bigger and better than simply the replacement. My understanding is the ideas around where exactly the money gets spent, particularly on leisure, goes through select committee.
Not all of that money is going to go to I know they're desperate for rugby enhancements and
right.
I mean, I appreciate that. That's why I'm asking. I appreciate
It's not really matter for this committee though, is it, where it's spent?
Have all the information. We don't always have all the.
That comes forward as a separate report, the Cabinet Chair.
Yeah,
thank you.
Right.
Okay. And just finally, on the render, because that isn't, you know, that's a matter of appearance. Can you just, the
So-
terracotta render
It's called
is...
brick red, but yeah. They're picked because of the.
And they're all-
traditionally got warm colours. You on the Wedgwood palette in Monmouth, you've got a warmer red colours. Yeah. So the brick was picked on the back of that, as was the colour of the roof tile and the render. And the idea was to. Sorry, I am loud enough. Okay. The idea was to keep it the palette as simple, not too busy.
It just looks very terracotta on the drawings.
Please ignore the drawings. The ink comes out. That's why I asked for samples to demonstrate exactly how they're portrayed. The drawings do make it look a little bit redder and a little bit pinker, and they don't always do the development justice.
Right, Councillor Clark.
First of all, I think you need to add a great deal of thanks to Joe about what has gone on. Sorry.
Can I add, it was very much a team effort. The green infrastructure team was massive on this site. Huge input, as was Mark Davis, our highway engineer. Very much a team effort on this site, coming forward like in this. So you've got the quality that's present before you now.
And to carry on, Roger, Ruth and I were pulled in towards the end of the negotiation, and we went through a lot of the detail with Joe, and that's why Ruth and I, and obviously Roger's not here, haven't needed to say anything about so much of the detail this afternoon, because we are happy with it, that it will look well. The detail, I understand, is going to be a condition. So we will actually condition the detail this time. We haven't done this before, as far as I understand, but we are going to do it this time. Rivets at windows, heads, sills, back and forward details, and so on and so forth. But these are the things we discussed when we came in, and Joe said we were here a long time. You've asked about Bovis on many occasions. The reason that Bovis aren't involved in this one, they are waiting for this decision from us this afternoon, and then they will reflect in what they propose to put on the Druin site will reflect this. So, you know, if we've said we're going to have pink walls, they'll have pink walls and so on. So there's a lot of common sense in not having the Bovis application here at this stage. It would be even harder for poor Jo to have had to deal with 3 people rather than she did with 2. So there's a lot of common sense in the approach we've taken. There's one downside. We spent hours and hours and hours, and Jo has failed to get from the developer the roof tile she wants. And I find that a complete, utter sadness. I work it out. This is between 60 and 70 million pounds worth of building work is going to go on just this one site. And I think for them to dig their heels in on this particular item, which I don't think will cost them a great deal, I find it unacceptable. You made a mistake earlier. I'm sorry, Mark. You said we were getting reconstructed slate. That's exactly what we want, and we can't get it. We are being asked to set the tile on the desk here. That's a concrete tile.
Can I address that? Right. Bear with me. Throughout the scheme, they've stood fast on the roof tile. And they originally came, I'm going to show you what they came in with. It weighs a ton. That's the delightful red love mini stone walls. And this is what they proposed that's what they proposed to approve. So that's originally what they came in, and up to the 11th hour, we got that changed. And I'll explain about the roof tile, because hands up, I would love to have seen recon slate. I'd love to see natural slate, but there are times when you actually recognise that all the stuff that's been added on makes the site financially not viable. And one of the justifications given back to me by the developers was that for us to go to a recon slate, they were adding 66% onto the cost of their development. And that it was attributed to about 66%. Now, bear with me a moment. Bear with me, because I did my work on this. That it makes a difference about £500,000. Now, what I did then, because I wanted to get Recon Slate was I went and spoke to the suppliers. I went straight to Redlands and I spoke to the main area manager that covered the area, as I did to the suppliers who do the Eternit, which is a standard Recon Slate. And they're right, there was no pulling the wool over the eyes on this one. It was a 60% increase between the Redland Mini Stonewalled and the Recon Slate. I have gone and I've asked and I've said, where do we stand? I'll be really straight with you. Where do we stand in terms of how much you're willing to negotiate? The heels have been dug in into a point. They said that it's just the final blow that broke the camel's back. This is something they're willing to not move on. They're not willing to move on. They state very clearly that they would have to go to appeal because it's a point of appeal because it's going to make the site financially so non-viable for them. You know. So what we came up with was an alternative. It's not a Recon Slate. It's a concrete tile which is thinner. It's got the edge. It's got a thinner edge on the front. There's two samples that were out on display. You've got the black one and you've got the blue one. I think the blue one is better. I think in terms of the condition, I think in terms of the decile, as well as adding about the sills and the recesses, we need to now condition the edging, because I think if it does sit, it sits right, it sits with, so that thin edge does show. As long as we condition the edging on the gables, so the material that's used along the edge that hides the fact there's a concrete block, I think we need to get that sorted and get that decile sorted. I think it would be a step too far to insist on this, and I'm sad to say this, but it's a step too far to insist that the Recon Slate is used. And that is why I've put forward this before you in committee. I think it's a heap better than what they provided before. No, it's not a Recon Slate. A Recon Slate would have had a lighter appearance, but I still think the colours and the actual thinness of the edge provides as good as we can get on a site of this size. So that's why I've put it before you.
Thank you, Joe, very much. Does anybody else wish to comment on that? Don't land it on your foot. Anybody else wish to comment now? David, sorry. Councillor Dove at the back.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, not on the tiles at all. I'd just like to say, I think...
Excuse me, Pauline.
Hold on a second, are we quorate, mate?
We're wondering if we're quorate if you leave. Yeah, we are. That's okay.
Get down to 4, Chairman, if you
Right,
want.
thank you. It's okay, Councillor Watts. It's okay. Sorry. Right, goodbye. Carry on. Who's speaking? Councillor Dovey.
Right, I'm not going to comment on the tiles at all, but firstly, I'd like to say that I think what Jo has done with the task that she's been briefed to do is pretty heroic. She's achieved a lot of improvement in the design. I think there's quite a lot of improvement in the design of the estate. It's pretty thoughtful. I think she's to be applauded for what she's done. For me, I think the design is much better than it was. It's never going to be perfect. Everybody has different ideas, but I think the estate looks better. I'm sure of that, and the change in the design of the houses has also made it appear to flow better. It fits together better, if you like. It's better to walk around and see, live within, I think. The one, with regard to the water, unfortunately, Alan and I have lived long enough to see what goes on down in that part of the world, with water up into the main street of Monmouth and people rowing in boats. Your predecessor, good sir up there, David Swanson, when we were having a heated argument about flooding in this area, and my limited knowledge of hydrology was being stretched as, I think it is hydrology, isn't it, Bob? I might be wrong about that, but my limited knowledge of that was being put to the strain, he did actually turn around to me and say, well, Councillor Duffy, you've got to understand we're not a tropical county or country yet. It was only 2 or 3 months down the road following his retirement that all the good things happened to Somerset, and I did happen to meet him in the car park and say, how tropical is it for you down in Somerset now? I am aware of the water that comes off those hills down there. I really am. And I know what you say, you have to take expert advice, but there is, I would want to be 12/10 sure that that is right. I really, that really does bug me. But the only other thing is, Rob across there and this byway, and whether it is legal for us or not, Rob, to say, you know, we can sit here and it was legal, we took the right decision. I don't think that is good enough when you're talking about farming wild animals. You have people were likely to come into Monmouthshire to live here that have no experience of the country, especially children. It shouldn't be made possible for them to get themselves in trouble with cattle. You know, it's just not on. And I think that access there, we shouldn't action it. I think it would be a really bad move. I wouldn't want it to bite us later. We might be able to throw our hands up in the air and say we were perfectly in the right. But if somebody gets injured, that goes all out through the window, and it will be Mon-CC should have seen this coming.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. I believe Rob would like to answer that.
Just to repeat, Councillor Dovey, there is an existing footpath there. There is a footpath in being.
It's the other side of
It's in the field, though, isn't it? It's in the field with the continental cattle. Yeah. So my point is, there is a footpath there now. Now, I totally accept that you're going to have a lot more people in the vicinity of this area if you grant permission today. Totally accept that. But there is an extant footpath there. It's there. So people could use it now. That's the only point that I wish to make. Whether we can link it up, that's another question. And we're going there into who owns what.
Well,
but I'm sure it'll be rectified, and obviously we'll need the council, being we, the council will need to discuss this further. Or discuss this at all. If Councillor Wintle is, according to Councillor Wintle, we'll have to discuss it with the landowner to come to a satisfactory conclusion.
I'm satisfied with that.
Lakeborough, did you wish to speak to Councillor Powell? Councillor Powell.
It's this drainage flooding business again. Is there a guarantee with the drainage system? So the house is up and running, they've got the drainage system in, and it doesn't work. Is there like a guarantee where you go back to the developer saying...
Can I just respond very quickly? I've been had the pleasure of sitting there with the Land Drainage Board and the developers, and the Land Drainage Board pulled them pits on their original drainage strategy and said, this is what I need to demonstrate, to make me happy that this provides not only the surface water drainage to the strategy in accordance with the original strategy, but also provides the betterment. And they've delivered that. In simple terms, and that's not to you, that's to me, because this is how I understand drainage, it's the actual surface water to accommodate the actual cubic content to accommodate the surface water from this site is around about 3,000 cubic metres. They're delivering 6,000. There's a 3,000 betterment. So there's an excess of 3,000, and they're taking into account the other sites. Now, what that does, that holds it, and it does a rate of discharge into the Wanstead Brook that's controlled. You haven't got that control. You've got a big blotting paper, but it enters the brook in an uncontrolled rate. So there is a massive improvement. So I've had a big learning curve on drainage. I wouldn't be putting it in front of you if I believed there's any way people would get flooded. I'm very happy with the scheme as presented.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say one thing. It's people's responsibility whether they walk through cattle or not. We have cattle of all sorts on the Castle Meadows and people walk through there daily. How often do you hear in the paper of cattle actually killing people or children or knocking them about? But you do hear of dogs savaging children, very often. But do we say, right, nobody's got to live anywhere where there's any dogs because they might get hurt? And I think we're getting off the track of that. It is entirely up to the people whether they're responsible enough, whether they want to walk through that field or not. And it's known that you should have them on leads. But what we're looking at today is the building of houses, homes for people. Whether they choose to walk across country fields is entirely up to them and it's their responsibility. We need homes.
I couldn't agree more, and I think the onus is actually on the farmer if he, knowing he's got a footpath across his field, that he has to be responsible for any activity, whether it's the animal or whatever. So I think everybody needs to be aware of the countryside code, and perhaps a little bit of education in the local schools would be a help on that matter, if there is great concern about where they should or shouldn't walk. Councillor Murphy.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I think we've discussed this to death. I've heard the same explanation probably up to 6 or 7 times now on the same matters. I propose we go to a vote.
I couldn't agree more, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Wintle, it's in your ward. Do you wish to move one way or the other? It is up for approval. You don't wish to move? Does anybody wish to move a recommendation for approval? Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Powell. A show of hands for approval.
That's 7 for approval, Chairman.
And those against?
2 against. Therefore, the motion is carried.
Right, thank you very much indeed, everyone. That's been a very long application debate. We now go to we're going to 223, aren't we now? Yeah, 223.
405. Okay.
No, it's my fault.
It's 405.
It's 40. Yeah, it's my scribbling. Sorry. Yes, it's
Page 217.
Abergavenny, 217.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try and be quite brief.
The only one here.
This is a site we visited yesterday. It's a housing plot on that parcel of land we saw. It's at the back of the Plasderin pub restaurant. They've also got guest accommodation over to the right-hand side behind the fence. It's truncated, if you like, or passed through by that private lane which accesses those 2 properties there that we could see in the far distance there, and to the left would be the parking and amenity area. So just go through the photos. That's looking back the other way at the where you come in off the cul-de-sac, off the housing estate, and that's the guest accommodation. That little window there, that sort of patio window you there see for the guest accommodation for the pub restaurant. That fence would be replaced with a stone wall 1.8 metres high. Again, that's looking back roughly the same shot. The amenity area will be over on the right-hand side, and that's one picture that was taken yesterday after we left the site. Actually, they started taking down the fence to just open it up and see how you can see how that area will be then reshaped as the curtilage and parking area for the proposed dwelling. So there's the layout. As you can see, access down here, turning area passing place in here to allow cars to come back and forth to the 2 properties and the private cul-de-sac there. The dwelling sitting on this side of the private lane with the fence removed and this opening up as amenity space here with a parking area for 2 cars and a turning area. 2 bedrooms, so it only needs 2 parking spaces. Some amenity space here and here, but primarily here. That's the floor plan. And then it's a modern design. You render the, whoops, stuck there, sorry. Slate roof, and with trying to avoid overlooking, as you can see from the rear, with just roof lights in the roof space above floor eye height, head height, and windows at the back, which aren't the main primary windows for those rooms. Those are formed by the windows at the front, which shed light into the rooms, because there'll be a 1.8 metre wall along here between the guest accommodation and the new dwelling. So we think it works. The access is reasonable for just one modestly sized dwelling. There's parking. There's a passing bay to allow people to pass and come and go. I think one thing the members noted on site yesterday, probably the need for a construction management plan, because it is a tight site and it is close to neighbours, so we perhaps need to add a condition in for a construction management plan, but otherwise we'd recommend approval.
Thank you very much, Phil. Maureen again, Abergavenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's in my ward. I think this will work quite well. Actually, we didn't walk right down the bottom. If you walk round to the bottom, the front of those two houses at the bottom, they've got a huge space in front of each house, about as big as here, you know, so they've got plenty of room for parking, turning around, and it's quite a decent driveway into it. I think it'll work quite well, and it doesn't affect the lodge, because the lodge is accessed from the main road up a long drive. Yeah, there's their access for the lodge there. They don't. The gate at the back into that little space, I think, was just a sort of extra exit if they wanted to use it, but that's not needed. And as long as they're reasonable when they're building it, and I mean, it's only going to be for a short while that lorries are going to be delivering building materials, and that's not going to be forever, and I recommend approval.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Murphy?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I entirely agree that an appropriate construction management plan is required there, because from the point of view of delivery lorries, the site will be relatively tight. Once they've gone, it won't be. The design complements the other two buildings noted there, 1 and 2. So I'm happy to second the recommendation for approval.
Yes, and I think when they're unloading, they've got a lot of space, even, you know, to carry on the building from across the other side. Yeah. So it's been recommended for approval. It's been proposed by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Murphy. Do I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Right.
Approval granted.
Thank you very much.
That's the sort of map that the diagram I was trying to get through. You can see the roads and everything's in relation.
Thank you. Last application now today is on page 223. And this is Chepstow for the lights at the school.
Okay, this is an application to install new lighting columns at Chepstow Car Park. It's one we looked at yesterday. While some of the lamp stands will be 6 metres high within the car park, those nearer to the that lay-by area, which has now been formed, which you can't see there, but which we saw yesterday, where some of the pear trees have been removed. Those are going to be reduced now to 2.5 metres above existing ground level, so they shouldn't protrude above the fence line, which is at a higher level. As you know, the land rises to the properties at the back there. Then there's a fence, so the light should sit at or below the level of the fence and be pointing downwards near the backs of the properties. So we think, you know, in terms of light in the car park, it needs to be improved to meet health and safety requirements. All in all, it's a reasonable scheme. The actual works to form the lay-bys were done under permitted development, so we would recommend approval to the revised design, which we think has largely met the neighbours' concerns. So we'd recommend approval.
I think we were all well aware of the situation when we visited there yesterday. So would somebody like to move approval? Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Powell. A show of hands for approval, please. Thank you all very much. Today, but I would like to highlight the fact that 9:30 next Monday there is training, a seminar at Little Mill at 12:30. Is that correct, Phil?
Yes.
9:30 till 12.
Yeah, 9:30. Yeah, it's primarily for community councillors.
Community council.
Madam Chairman, just for the record, I was waving my hand about, whilst it's my ward, I'm a school governor at the school there, and so said to have an
Right, thank you. I'm sure Rob will take that on board. Thank you. So that's at Little Mill on Monday.
The 9:30 community council training, I mean, it's obviously optional for all of you, but if you are community councillors, you're welcome to come along, or not, as the case may be. So you're very welcome.
And
It's provided by Planning Aid, the training, but officers such as Mark, myself and Paula, and somebody from Policy? Jane from Policy will be there attending in case there are any questions on a local level. We've also got the design tour on Friday the 16th, leaving...
Have you all replied to that? Thank you.
Busy people.
Are we live streaming now, Sarah?